Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is good to see everyone. I want to do a quick mic check, not a check on me, but it's been a hot minute since I have been live, and so I'm getting everything set up and running. I want to make sure that the audio is good, crisp. Let me know on the chat. I'm going to put the live chats. All right, it says everything is good. That's good to hear. I'm going to try to keep a lot of the live chat up on the right-hand side if it doesn't bother people, just so that as we go through today, y'all can see what's happening on the chat. So it's good to have everyone. Happy New Year, by the way. It's great to see you all again. I wanted to do something unique at the beginning. I got a lot of books so far for some of these what we call Christmas gifts. I just wanted to share with you as an audience before we get started, because we got a lot of stuff going on today. We're gonna review some comments. We're just gonna have some fun reviewing some comments that's been happening on the community kind of comment channels for YouTube. Good, bad, indifferent, whatever. We're gonna check that out. I'm gonna hopefully teach you all some new tips and tricks with research methods that I use with Logos. And so we're going to look at that. And then if we've got time, we'll do a little bit of a response. And that was queued up by, the last post that I made, which was in reference to a kind of a theological statement that happened on a refutation to a Roman Catholic named William. So I'm going to engage on that. Derek, it's good to have you. No worries. Y'all hang out if you can now. If not, totally get it. Spend some time with the family. I love that. You can catch us later, but grateful that you're here. I wanted to just share some books that I got. Currently, ones I'm reading so that you guys know what I'm reading currently. I've got 3 new classes coming up this next semester for my master's, and I'm excited about that. Some of these are connected to some of those classes, and would definitely encourage you to read any and all of these. So this is one I'm reading currently right now. I'm actually, I'm maybe a quarter of the way through. So this is the basics. Theology, the basics. This is Alistair McGrath. If you really want to kind of an overview of kind of what Christianity believes, just as an entrance point, definitely check this out. I'm reading that currently. This I'm reading for the second time, and I'm doing it specifically because I was cued with some research that I was doing. So this is actually a book that I got at the first time I was at SBL, Society of Biblical Literature, and I ran into and met John Walton for the first time. You'll see actually here, it says, I don't know if you see it there. This is not for sale. In fact, these were given out for free before they came out. This is just, I have it in Logos. But man, this is just a treasure trove of, and it's really cool the way John does this, because he basically makes a proposition, and I appreciate the way he does this. He makes a proposition and then he defends that proposition. And so I think he's got how many propositions does he have? Let's see here. He's got 16 propositions. So if you're into apocalyptic literature, this would be really good with the ongoing series for Revelation. By the way, we're going to get that started and kicked off again this Friday. Some of you have been waiting patiently for that. And so I appreciate that. This also deals with Old Testament prophecy and how Old Testament prophecy is dramatically different than what most people think of when it comes to prophecy or a prophet. And that's good if you're, different traditions have different views of that. So that's really good. Yes, by the way, I think I'm interpreting you right, Adrian. Is this John Walton? Yes, it is. I don't know. He must be having a hard time typing. I don't know if you're grabbing something good to drink or not, but I think I knew what you were talking about. So yes, this is a fabulous book. What else am I reading? So, I mentioned this in Discord. If you aren't already a part of the Discord channel, scan the code in the corner there. But this also is a part of my master's program. A fabulous book, Ancient Word, Changing Worlds. This deals with really the overview of it's really kind of the overview of inspiration, inerrancy, infallibility, and it deals with kind of the progression in Christianity that kind of is the historical reality of the process of kind of creating that doctrine. And so you'll get things from different theologians and kind of their stance and ins and outs. This couples really well. I'm missing all my stuff with this one here. So if you're looking for that, that's really good. Now we're getting into some more dense stuff. I'm reading this one as well. This guy is incredible. This is Larry Hurtado. So if you're interested in kind of the socio-rhetorical or sociological position of the kind of the clash between the Roman perspective or worldview versus kind of the Israelite worldview, this is incredibly good. So this is early Christian distinctives in the Roman world, and it's called Destroyer of the Gods. So I'm also reading this one. Pretty new in this one. In fact, I've just started into the introduction of it, but I have read excerpts of Hurtado's other books, and it's extremely good, like extremely good. Okay, so definitely want you to be aware of that. Now, here's one that honestly, this is a tough one for me, because if you know anything about my reading, I enjoy things that I'm learning like academically. I don't do a lot of like just for fun reading. But if you are a fan of Lord of the Rings, if you're a fan of C.S. Lewis, this is really an interesting read. It's a tough one for me because it's not kind of along my genre that I enjoy. But this is theology through mythology, and it's actually Tolkien dogmatics. Highly acclaimed by Kevin Van Hooser, which we're going to get a Dr. Van Hooser is going to be one of the articles coming up for Article Monday. That's going to be fabulous. So this actually is not a book on theology per se. This is really about because Tolkien was not a theologian per se. Tolkien was the best friend of C.S. Lewis, and really what this is sharing how he was a Roman Catholic, and how his theology inadvertently or advertently comes out in the way he describes Middle Earth and all of his kind of Lord of the Rings, all of his stories. So if you like Lord of the Rings, if you like Tolkien, you should definitely pick this up. It's a little bit of a thick book, but it's not, well, I guess it's kind of small reading. So if you like it, great. All right, now into some, I've got a lot. We're just going to have some fun. Okay. Yeah, Derek. Honestly, it's, it's an interesting read. That book is really interesting, because I don't think people realize. I think what I would say initially, and I've only been, to be very transparent, I'm only literally from the introduction into the first chapter. It's actually talking about the Trinity right now, because there's an interesting connection to the Trinity and Middle Earth theology and all that stuff. And so, what's interesting to me is that what gets discussed here, I think, is helpful in what happens really to all of us. We're all theologians. And so whether or not we realize this or not, the reality is our theology comes out in how we discuss things. And so, yeah, so that's going to be a fun one. Okay. So if you're a part of Discord, you already knew this, but, I happened to get this treasure trove. I think it's been 3 months waiting for this one, and they finally got it out to me. This is, and I will be talking about this book coming up in 2026. Actually going to have a scholar come on that specializes in divine counsel. So you're going to get some of this as I've already read the book. I've worked through, when I say I've already read it, I've already read the first one, the expanded edition. I've looked at all the extra material that's been added into it. But this right here, my friend, this is so good. Adrian, you'll get yours. I promise. It showed up. I don't know when you purchased yours, but it's happening. So just be patient. I know that a lot of you, at least those that have purchased that book have been waiting. Now, this was a gift. I had forgotten that I had put this particular one on my wish list, and I had one of my family members buy this for me. I can't vouch for it or not yet. I've sifted through it, haven't started it. Okay. But this is interesting. It's called Generation Hoodwinked. I don't know yet really what to tell you about it. I can't say much. The impact of the Nephilim agenda today. This is Laura Sanger, PhD. Honestly, I don't know what to say yet about this. But it does get reviews from like, let's see, Luke Rogers, Mike Weaver, Carmen Studer. These are not, I don't expect this to be a highly academic kind of book. I expect this to be fairly accessible, and I don't know if I'm going to buy into what they're speaking, but we'll see. This was a nice one. This is one of those coffee table ones. My brother actually got me this one. This is one of those coffee table ones for Psalms, and really nice, actually. It's got, this is the ESV version. It's put out by Crossway, and just really nice. Okay, it's got all the Psalms in here with pictures. Of course, what I did immediately with this was go to Psalm 82, because I wanted to read it. And in the ESV, it says, God has taken his place in the divine council in the midst of the gods. He holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show impartiality to the wicked? Yeah. So we'll be talking about all that stuff at some point. This is this is a table, kind of one of those table ones. I absolutely had to go straight for Psalm 82. And then I looked at some of the others that connect to it. So that was fun. All right. So the last part of the book stuff, and then we'll get into some other stuff, is when we were in Michigan, we were in Detroit, actually. And Detroit, Michigan has at least one of the acclaimed largest used bookstores. It was like 4 levels. And, all of the walkways were super narrow. I mean, just millions of books. So we went there, and we spent far too much, but we went there and had a good time. The girls got stuff. My wife got stuff. So I'm going to show you the treasure trove that I found, that I picked up. This is, I don't know if you can see this. This is Christian. Can you see that there? Yeah, the Christian. I'm going to just hold it there so you guys can see real quick. So this is The Christian Doctrine of Man by Robinson. And this is an older book put out by Edinburgh T&T Clark by Wheeler Robinson. And this really deals with, the doctrine of man. And if you don't know what that is, it deals with dualism. It deals with dogmatic anthropology. I'm really excited. Gnosticism. I'm really excited actually to get into some of this. I think I own this in Logos, but I've got a copy of it now. And this is, let's see, this is what version? See, the first edition was 1911, April. The reprinted edition was 1958. This is a first edition. So this is, I always like to get books like this. And the reason I like to is because my experience in Adventism is such that I always thought that the rest of the world, like Christianity in the late 1800s, 1900s, was like spiritually neutered or like incapable of understanding anything because of the way I was taught, like Christian theology and history and like all this stuff. And that, that all these other denominations had like horrible theologians and Adventists like were the ones that brought everything back, So I always like reading books that are dense like this from the 1900s and go, wait a second, this was printed 4 years before Ellen White died. And you've got people that aren't plagiarizing. You've got people that are actually engaging in dialogue and discussion, theologians that understand original language. They understand the text that are really getting after it. So that's that one there. Here's another one along similar. It's not quite as old. Let's see. This is 1968, put out by Oxford University Press. I have read several books by this scholar, Bruce Metzger. He's the professor of New Testament language and literature at Princeton Theological Seminary. And this is an older book, but this is the text of the New Testament. It's Transmission, Corruption, and Restoration, second edition. And this deals with critical textual text criticism. It deals with, let's see, what are some other things it gets into? The making of ancient books, which is really helpful to understand, important witnesses to the text, modern critical period. It's just a really good, if you're wanting to understand kind of how the Bible was put together, just really, really, really good. So I've always appreciated Bruce Metzger and his other work. So I picked that one up. All right. So the next one that is not going to deal directly with Adventism is this book here. It's a thin one. I already read through it. This is actually put out by Columbia University. And this is actually number 3 in a lecture series, and you're going to see why I picked it up. Okay. This is called Gospel and Law by Dodd. Now, if you don't know who Dodd is, this is C.H. Dodd. He's pretty popular in the earlier kind of late, this was put out in 1950, 1951 actually. And these are put together from some of his lectures on this concept. So there's basically 4 chapters or 4 lectures here that get discussed. It's preaching and teaching in the early church, principles and motives of Christian ethics in the New Testament, the ethical teaching of the Gospels, and then this is the reason why I bought it, the law of Christ. That's chapter 4. I immediately read through that. It's not long. Very good arguments, very good understanding. I don't think enough Christians, I know not very many Adventists that I've interacted with really even have heard of the laws of Christ. And so, that was an easy pickup for me. Now, the last one before I share some Adventist things, I could not, you guys are going to know, this is a little bit Adventist, but it's not. It is, but it isn't. I could not turn this away. This is a complete and unabridged illustrated edition of Milton's Paradise Lost. And friends, this is when I went online and looked, this was $15. You have to pay about $180 for this. Okay. This is just, very beautiful artwork. Okay. Now you're going to notice, and I may end up talking about this at some point. Okay. Because you're going to notice that much of the imagery that gets used, if you know, you know. Ellen White, I believe firmly, I know that many will disagree with me, but Ellen White borrowed from the imagery in this book. Very specific things like the brow of Satan, the way he looked, which, by the way, Satan's not human. He calls him Lucifer, which, by the way, that's a whole nother thing. Lucifer isn't really a name of the adversary. That has a whole history. But there's lots of evidence to posit that Ellen White, at minimum, knew or borrowed or took from, or whatever the language that you want to use, from Milton's Paradise Lost. So I couldn't turn this away. Had to pick that up. It was only $15. Now, the rest of these, okay, these were just, I could not believe this. I've never heard of this. Okay. The Rise of Adventism. Believe it or not, Jonathan Butler actually writes a section in this, which I believe he's an Adventist historian, I think. Here's the contents. A time of religious ferment, social reform, health reform, science and religion, communitarianism, spiritualism, millennialism, revivalism, Millerism, and then Adventists and the American experiment. This is not put out by the Adventist Church. This is actually published by Harper and Row. So that gives me a little more credibility as to the historical kind of elements of it. This is published in 1974. So you've got people like Edwin Gustad, Winthrop Hudson, Timothy Smith, John Blake, John Green, Robert Hine, Lawrence Moore, Ernest Sandine, William McLaughlin, David Arthur, and then Jonathan Butler, all writing segments of this. So just adding to my research for Adventism. That's great. Now, I couldn't believe this. I picked this up. Actually, I think my wife found this one. And you'll never guess what I wanted to go see if it was in there, okay? So another gospel, this is by Zondervan. In fact, this is Zondervan Academic. Okay, so from a publishing standpoint, this is a very well thought of publisher. And, this is on cults, alternative religions, and New Age movement. Now, you can imagine what I immediately did, right? Like, okay, first of all, when is this published? This was published in 1989, to give you context. This is after, I believe it's after the Walter Ray and the Walter Martin interaction. But I immediately went in here and said, okay, who does this person talk about? Okay, so the chapters are cult, sects, denominations, world religions, definitions, and terms. So it's important to set up terms properly. Historical heresies, unorthodox movements. Then we get Mormonism. This is the third chapter. The fourth chapter is Seventh-day Adventism. Eschatological confusion. They've sandwiched them right in between Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, I don't know if you knew this or not, but thanks to, I don't remember who, someone shared recently that there was a Spectrum article that came out. I'm happy to share it. I probably will share it in the Discord chat. That Did you know that Ellen White is actually related through marriage to Joseph Smith? Now, that's not just a made up thing. It's not like it's a factual thing. In fact, the article quoting it and stating it is a Spectrum article. And I think it was cousin through marriage, a cousin first removed, I think is the way it went. So there is some connection to, interestingly, about the time Joseph Smith died, Ellen White picked up her kind of movement. Now, I don't know that there's anything you can say that that's like any direct connection. It's just interesting from a like phenomenon standpoint. There were a lot of those types of movements happening in the 1840s, 50s, 30s, all of that. Two other small books. Speaking of Mormonism, I found this one and this was awesome. I was like, what in the world? All right. So this is put out by SPCK. This is actually a very small tract. Okay. I found this. Okay. Just a small tract. Look at this. Just small. Okay. But look at the title. I couldn't believe this. Okay. I just had to have this. Now this is published. This is just a small, tiny tract published in 1961, talks about Mormonism, talks about Seventh-day Adventism, the connection with the two, ins and outs. Anyways, more to come on that. I thought that was really interesting. And then the last thing, which I don't think is going to be as helpful as I thought it was going to be, is a book actually put out by the Review and Herald that I found that's called Prophecy Speaks. And this is Dissolving Doubts. Prophecy Speaks. Doesn't really at first thought you would think that it's going to talk about Ellen White. It's kind of like set in a story format, so it's interesting to see how it gets like communicated. But it's kind of like a story of a debate back and forth. So anyways, it's not quite as helpful as I thought it was going to be, but it's old. It's fun to have old stuff from a book standpoint. I think that's it, friends. That's a lot. I think there may be more to come. Okay. So those are the books. Yeah. Did I miss anything? I don't think I did. That's it. All right. Well, I told y'all on the description that today's conversation was going to be a review of some comments. I want to just review because I don't think it's always fair. I don't think everyone sees all the comments. I want people to just be aware of. I will, as I get into this comment section or kind of reviewing some of these comments, I'm going to kind of take you behind the scene in the community chat of the YouTube studio so that you have access or that you see what's going on. And then what I want to do is, and let me see, this is kind of obviously episode 2. We already did kind of something that I wasn't necessarily going to do. I thought it would be fun though, the book reviews, at least sharing what I've got coming down the pipeline with those. But the rest of the show today, and do me a favor, like, subscribe, hit the notification bar. If you're interested in this content and you're looking for other additional supplemental content, scan the QR code in the corner there. That'll give you access to, if you want to subscribe to Patreon, which I would encourage you to at least be a free member of Patreon. If you're wanting to support the ministry, that's a great place to do it as well. But if you just want the free version, you'll at least get notifications of things. You won't get access to everything, but you'll at least get notifications. And then, of course, you're welcome to join the Discord chat. We've got lots of great conversation there. And if you are watching and you're an Adventist, we would love to have you. If you're watching and you want to debate Adventist things, we have an entire channel. Just let us know when you join that that's what you're interested in doing, and we have people that would love to engage in discourse with you. So in a way that honors Christ and honors the text. We always try to keep things very respectful inside of the Discord chat. So please do join. I do a once a week Bible study. We've got lots of other events going on. So just would love to have you be a part of that. What I want to do is I want to review some comments. And if you noticed on the YouTube channel, there's been more posts, there's been more shorts that have been happening. Those shorts will connect to the main videos, which is helpful. So if you find the short helpful and you want to kind of share or spread the news about it, share it on YouTube or share it with your friends, the short, so that they can then click on the link if they want to watch the full video, or if they want to dialogue and discourse on it. So appreciate those of you that reached out and said Happy New Year, the dialogue and discourse on that. Some of you might be wondering why I do and don't engage in certain things on the comments. You'll notice, you may or may not have noticed that I have deleted some comments. I want people to know this because I'm always very fully transparent about this. The only time I will ever delete a comment, ever, is if it is an ad hominem attack on myself, or, and I really want you guys to keep the ad hominem attacks on other people as well. It's just not fair when you're engaging in discourse. It's just a lack of respect, maybe, is a good way. So the only ones I've deleted is when someone has personally attacked me personally. And so, some of those people I've either blocked or just deleted. Let's review some of these though. I always like to look at some of this stuff. If you notice the, let's see, let me go to, I don't know why I did that. Hang on just a second. This particular, let's go here. So this is a post that was made, which you're welcome to read. I find these types of posts where it engages in like challenging the Adventist theology around Ellen White kind of interesting. So we get these types of comments, okay, to you, Mike, and then, a text kind of ripped out of context. But okay, I'll run with it. Okay. So the text says, "And the Lord God of their fathers sent to them by his messengers, rise up." I think that's a misspelling, and sending. I don't know what that is, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of God and despised his words and misused his prophets until the wrath of God arose against the people. Till here was no remedy. Now, I don't even know that that's actually what it says, because I think there's some typos. But his comment is, "But they mocked the messengers of God and despised his words and misused his prophets until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, till there was no remedy." Now, I think what this guy is trying to say, and this, I get this quite a bit, okay? I think what this guy is trying to say is he's trying to claim that a quote from the Old Testament, which has a context, which refers to the messengers of God and the prophets in the Old Testament, where people were mocking said prophets, that they're now using this as a proof text that because my post is, in his eyes, mocking Ellen White, that somehow the wrath of God is going to be put on me. Okay. Okay. I don't get this, but this happens a lot. I'm telling you, this happens a ton. Okay. Um, and then you get, here's another angle at it. And by the way, I don't delete, videos. If you put video links on here, that's fine as long as they're appropriate. But this is a link to Doug Batchelor. And I haven't done any reviews on Doug Batchelor, but in looking at much of his teachings, which is really just a parodying of the Adventist system, he just is this is what happens all the time. Okay. Oh, you're wrong. You're the devil. The wrath of God's going to be thrown on you. And here's Doug Batchelor. Here's Mark Finley. It gets done with like ADL. Watch out, ADL will catch you. All this. That's a bunch of hogwash. It's junk. Okay. But this is the method by which a lot of this happens. Now, I did find this interesting. Okay. As a former SDA and SDA clergy man, I read this kind of thing for entertainment only. And this is obviously my post on Ellen White, which was a riff on. Now, I need you guys to understand why I did this, okay? And those of you that are Adventists, or if ADL is watching at some point, or Kevin Morgan at some point, I need you all to understand something, okay? I'll say this again, but I'll say this here. This is not just a Mike Colburn on YouTube thing. This is, my wife and I run a business. We do very well. We have a business for insurance. You have a division that does investments. We have, retirement planning, annuity, retirement income planning. We have we have a large team of over 300 people that we work with. And so I'm very familiar with leadership. I'm very familiar with interacting with people. And what I tell people in the business is the same here. There's really only a couple of ways that you can lose influence with me, or that you can put yourself in a position where I'm just not interested anymore. The predominant thing is to claim something and then not do it. To say you're going to do something, and this is in a leadership position, where if you say you're going to do a specific thing, whether it's an action or, hey, this is what I'm committing to, and then you don't do it, that just proves to me that you're just not a reliable person. Now, the same can happen inside of academics. If you make a claim and then you don't back it up, okay, you make a claim, you say something is out of context, you claim that someone is doing a certain fallacy, and then you in turn prove that using the same problems that you're reprimanding someone else of, or you claim something is, hey, they're using this out of context, and then you yourself take stuff out of context. That's a quick way to lose my interest. Okay. And it doesn't mean that I won't listen per se, but it just means I'm not interested in engaging anymore. The reason I'm sharing this is because there is a history with the Adventist pastor, Kevin Morgan, and he may be listening. I don't dislike him. I don't hate him. I hope he knows Jesus Christ. I hope he grows in Christ. I hope he understands what the gospel actually is. I think he's blinded to that right now. But my mission and goal in the YouTube channel is not Kevin Morgan. It's not ADL. Okay. My mission and goal with both the website and YouTube and Patreon, all of them, because they're all part of the same mission, and that is breaking the chains of poor theology. And in the academic field, when someone constantly misrepresents you, when someone constantly badgers you, is belligerent towards you, uses below the belt logic, and the big straw that kind of broke the camel's back with my interest in really engaging at all directly with Kevin Morgan was his involvement in and I don't think he meant, okay, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't think he meant it in an ill way. I don't think so. Okay. At least I want to believe that. But when you're engaging online, there's certain, especially if you consider yourself a scholar and an academic, there are certain protocols, there's certain like good faith things that, and you just don't do that. Okay. If we get to it, I'm gonna respond to ADL later on in the show, where they engaged with a response to the guy that's called the Butcher, William. I don't know how to say his last name off the top of my head. I don't like the way William engaged. I thought he was belligerent. I thought he was a bully. It lowered his credibility in the arguments that he was making. So I'm not an advocate for that kind of behavior. I really dislike verbal manipulation and verbal bullying. It happens a lot on social media. It happens a lot in the comments, predominantly from Adventists that are approaching like people like Ryan Day, people like me. It is, and these are people that claim, and this is what frustrates me. These are people that claim that because they're keeping the law and they have the truth, like we're the remnant. And yet that's the fruit that comes from whatever it is that they have. Okay. Part of the reason I have not engaged directly with ADL and specifically with Edwin is because he has not treated me in good faith. Okay. Always. There are some things that I thought he was treating me in good faith, letting me know ahead of time. And then in the live stream where he engaged and talked about me, he was just below the belt. I'm not interested in that stuff. I don't fight dirty. I don't call people names. I try best not to do ad hominem attacks. I try to deal with the issues at hand. And I'm continuing to try to be better. It's part of my master's program. Part of my PhD program after that is how do you engage academically with theological frameworks that disagree with your own in a way that still respects the other person. Now, you're going to see today at some point scholars that do that. This happens in the academic world, okay? I don't consider personally, this is just my opinion, I don't consider Kevin Morgan an academic. I know he thinks he is. He doesn't act like one. He doesn't engage like one. And I'm saying this because I'm calling him up. Okay. You want my respect. You want me to engage with you. Hey, if you don't, that's fine. But if you do, then you need to be better at treating people the right way. Same with ADL. You want me to come onto your live. I don't trust you because the people I know personally that have come on your show have not been treated well. I know that factually. So for all of the Adventist supporters, the people that want to prove Mike wrong, whatever it is, I'm not interested in being proved right or wrong. I just want to divide the word of God rightly. That's all I want to do. I want to honor the text. I want to teach other people to honor the text. And part of the reason that I don't engage and I quit engaging with Kevin Morgan, and I won't. I told him I would not engage with him because he just won too many. Okay. At some point, it doesn't matter to me if Kevin Morgan is an Adventist pastor. To me, it's worse. If you're a spiritual leader and you're acting like you are and you're responding and you're belligerently attacking people, whether or not you think you are or not, okay? If you're using rebuttals that are, even if they're hypothetical, I would not use a rebuttal to say, hey, Kevin, you know what? I'll answer your question after you tell me when you've stopped beating your wife. I would not use that type of framework because it's below the belt. Even if people think it's hypothetical, okay, even if they do, the problem is that it's so easy to be taken out of context, especially in a social media platform, that that it doesn't value the other person. It doesn't value my wife. It doesn't value my family. And so I just don't engage. Okay. That's just the way it is. Now, that doesn't mean I won't respond on my own platform, but I have prevented him from being able to comment on my channel. He can see, that's fine. And of course, he keeps responding. That's fine, but I won't respond back. I'll do it on my side. But this was in response. Okay, what we were talking about was in response to one of his comments. And I just want people to understand that the Adventist position, when it comes to their understanding of angels wearing crowns and all this stuff, it's all out of Ellen White. It's all mythology that's created out of the construct and mind of a potentially a hallucinating woman who knows if she was in an ecstatic dream or if she was on like drugs or I don't know what, but the woman was crazy. Okay. And that's just my opinion based on my own research. And so, this is how I want you all to know, because I want you to know that you can trust me. I want you to know how I engage, that I've blocked about a dozen people on my channel for the same reasons. Okay. And I don't have plans or a desire to let them back. You lose your right. Okay. Yes, this is a free country. You can do the same thing to me. You don't want me to comment on your channel? That's fine. Block me. That's okay. But this is from that dialogue, and so let's just review some more comments here. I don't disagree. She probably is an innermost circle of the Trinity, surpassing the apostles in vision and inspiration. I don't disagree. That might be the case. I'm glad that this spawned an interesting conversation, Adrian. I'm glad that was the case. I did have someone respond on Facebook, because I put the same quote on Facebook. And the comment was, hey, this might be a good time to mention that that Ellen White said that you had to have a golden, that the angels had golden cards. It's just, I don't understand. Oh, it's just, this is like, I mean, this is crazier than this stuff. This is, you want to know crazy. Just look at Ellen White's theology. Yeah, so there was a response about the 24 elders in this comment. And I'm going to say this just so you all know, if you're following my Revelation series, I'm going to make a comment on that in my Revelation series when we get there. So I don't think it's a good argument with regards to like angels having crowns. Okay. Number one, angels having crowns is an argument from silence. And it's a reading in between the lines from Ellen White. So if you place Ellen White in authority in what she says to be, from the throne room of God, then I can see why you would believe it. But there is no, there is no textual evidence anywhere. Okay. And this is part of the article that I posted, or the response I posted. There's nothing in the biblical text, and there's nothing in Second Temple texts that makes that statement. And so to conclude that, thousands of years later, here now Ellen White gets this new, that's very Gnostic. Okay. No, I'm not going to go with that. I don't think that Ellen White got anything new with regards to this topic. Charlene, I appreciate that. Glad you're enjoying it. Appreciate you being here, and appreciate the opportunity. So glad to see you here. What else do we have here? What else? Okay. Yeah, Scotty, there's some truth behind this. She absolutely exalts Satan to all kinds of crazy stuff. Crown sets that up for Lucifer and Jesus. By the way, just a side note, you all may or may not know this, but I hope you do. Lucifer is not a real name of Satan. I don't know if you know that or not. And I find that comical, and I always bring it up with regards to Ellen White because it's funny to me that she uses a name that is, it's from the Morning Star out of Isaiah, and it was constructed as a transliteration of the Latin terms Hallel, um, which is morning star, and in it, the transliteration is Lucifer, and that I think became something that was popularized. Um, I think it was a Latin priest. I have to look up the details off the top of my head. We can look at it when we get Logos opened up, because there's, I mean, this is common knowledge if you know kind of the history of the word. Lucifer is not a proper name for the devil. It just isn't. Okay, it is it's a Latin transliteration that comes from the word Hallel out of the book of Isaiah, and those that made that connection believed that the passage was talking about the devil because it talks about falling from heaven and all that stuff. Now, whether or not it is or isn't is neither here or there. It's not a proper name of the devil. It just isn't. Okay, so I don't just stop using Lucifer, please. That would be what I would say. Satan isn't even the proper name. Okay, if you want to get into proper names, it would probably be more like Beelzebub, or there are some others, Baal, but those aren't really. I mean, they're not really even necessarily proper names of the Satan or the devil. Satan is just Satan, and Satan is the is the word that's really just, it should be properly translated as adversary. And so when you see Satan, if you go to the original language, this is especially the case. Well, this is the case for Hebrew because in Greek it's diabolos, it's devil. Okay, and so in the Old Testament in Hebrew, when you see Satan, it's almost never there's only one time. It's almost never the Satan. It's adversary, or it's an adversary. And so it's why I personally am not convinced that there's just one. And if you want to know some more kind of research and academic work around that topic, I'm happy to share. Again, scan the code, jump into Discord. We can chat through it. I can give you lots of books that kind of trace the motif of the adversary, or there are some that call him the executioner, because there's a prevailing thought in Jewish theology that that the adversary actually was in the council. He was actually the executioner, and so he was part of the casting of judgment. That's, and again, you see that in Job. If you read the story of Job, the adversary, the Satan in Job, is not actually a demonic person or entity. It's actually doing the will and the actions of what God is asking him to do. He's doing his job. And so he's in the council with God. It's not like he's someone that's fallen from heaven. Like, none of that theology is present in there. The adversary in Job is not a demonic being, any shape, way, or form. Anyways, enough of that. Yes, Charlene, that is, thank you for reminding me. That is an absolutely good book. The other guy that has written some really good stuff on this is Archie Wright. He's got 2 books. They are very dense. Archie Wright is an academic of all academic, and it's very dense. I love it. Those are my favorite types of books because there's lots of footnotes, lots of research, all that stuff. But he has 2 books that works through it. There's another really good book that's actually written by an Adventist scholar. The only reason why I recommend it, and I actually was recommended this book by Dr. Heiser. And the only reason why it gets a recommendation from me anyways, is because it's not published by an Adventist publisher. It's actually published by Baker. Anyways, it's John Peckman's book, Theodicy of Love. And it actually engages in some of this as well. So anyways, off on a rabbit trail. Yeah, always good stuff. Yeah, I love dialoguing on Job and the Hasatan, which would be the adversary. And again, if you guys are interested in this kind of stuff, please just do it right now. Jump over to Patreon. Hit the just here. Let me just put it up real quick. Where's the, let's see. So go to this. Well, that really takes over most of the screen there. But go over to Patreon, the Thinking Cup, and just it's in the QR code as well. And just subscribe to the free membership. Okay. I would be honored if you would support the ministry. I would be honored. Okay. If you were willing and wanted to support at any level, like I would be honored for that. There's a lot that's going to happen this year. There's a lot of new things going on. We started a new Academic Monday. That's going to have a new one this Monday. I've already been building about 3 or 4 different articles right now that I've got in the pipeline for that. There's going to be some really good stuff. You only get access to those articles if you're a member. You can actually watch the video and read the post, but you won't be able to get the access to the actual PDF. There's going to be some private video live streams that are going to happen on Patreon, exclusively on. It won't be even in YouTube. So just if you're interested in supporting the ministry, now what does that go towards? I'm always very transparent about the ministry. Okay. So there are 3 areas that that you support what it is that we do. Okay. It costs money to have a website, to host a website. And so whether or not you're supporting by membership on YouTube, whether or not you're supporting by watching YouTube, sharing it with others, that helps. Whether or not you're supporting by just going to thethinkingcup.com, you can donate there, just lump sums. If you want to donate $100 or $500 or $10 or $1, like every penny helps. So it's from hosting the website, which is roughly $50 to $75 a month, thereabout. Okay. There are some additional things that go into that. It's all the way from StreamYard that I use to stream. That's a monthly membership to be able to do that. Okay, to be able to stream properly. That gives me access to doing all the AI shorts that have been going out. The other thing that helping to support me financially does, it goes towards my master's program. Now, if you don't want it to go towards the master's program and you want it to go something else, then I would tell you to go to thethinkingcup.com, donate a specific amount, and tell me what you're wanting to support. Okay. Now, currently, this is not a nonprofit like 501c organization. So there's no tax benefit from doing that. That might be something down the pipeline, but thank you for those of you that have been supporting. We've got some regular subscribers on Patreon. We've got people that have donated through the website. Those of you that are members on YouTube, thank you. I would have a much harder job doing this if it wasn't for you guys. So thank you and girls. Okay. You know what? I don't know that I want to keep reviewing the comments. I thought I was going to enjoy that. I don't know that I'm enjoying that. I think we need to get on to some other stuff. It's already been an hour. I think we need to get on to some other stuff. So here's what we're going to do in the remain. Now, if you have questions, okay, do me a favor. If you have questions, I see some of you have been asking questions. They do pop up. Okay. Lay, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. That's out of my jurisdiction. So I'm sure I could maybe YouTube it or Google it or AI it or something and find out, but I'm not sure the answer to that one. If you do have questions though, as we go through this, just post it. If you really want it to be dealt with, you're welcome to use the super chat. That is another way that you can support, because those super chats do go to the YouTube channel in support of the YouTube channel. So here's what we're going to do in the last hour. Okay. Something like that. I want to go through, I want to take your questions as we go through some of this. Okay. I think this half is going to probably spawn more questions than the first half. But I want to do some responding to the video by Advent Defense League. Apparently this is a part 1. Okay. And it's SDA's Refute Bible Butchering, part 1. And they tagged William Albrecht. Now, William Albrecht is, and I'm going to say this again, I watched that entire stream that they're refuting or they're dialoguing on. I'll say this again. I did not like William's attitude. I thought it weakened his arguments. Secondly, he's a Roman Catholic. I am not. Okay. So there are arguments that William makes that I don't agree with. I don't see it that way. I don't need to see it that way. It's fine if he does see it that way. As we go through some of this, what I will do is I will teach you guys how I use Logos to probe, research, interact with, engage with statements, ideas. One of the things I learned from Dr. Heiser was just because someone makes a statement doesn't mean it's true. Just because they claim it to be fact doesn't mean it's true. Just because someone says something about you doesn't mean you have to accept it as truth. We need to use our critical minds when we engage. And this is true with me. Like, just because I say something, I've said this before, don't take, hey, Mike said that, it's true. Please don't do that. Don't put me on that level. I've made plenty of mistakes theologically in the past. I'm sure I'll make more. It's why most of the time you'll hear me say, that's at least where I am now. I tend to like, this is how I see it currently, because my perspective will change as I become more knowledgeable of the text. Up until right now, my academic career has been more of the personal pursuit. Last semester, this is just kind of the final thing before we get into this. Last semester was my first semester at DTS. That's my master's program. The master's program at DTS is a 120-hour program. Most master's programs are somewhere between 40 and 60 hours. This is what's called a mini PhD. It will give me the ability to get my PhD pretty much from anywhere that I want to. So part of the requirements for that PhD or that mini PhD, the master's program, that it's called a THM, Master's of Theology, is I will be doing double the amount of language classes than any other program requires. So I say this because up until now, most of my interaction with manuscripts, my interaction with languages has only been able to be done because of the software I use. I'm going to show you how I do that. I'm going to show you the ins and outs. I'm even going to, like, if you want to test it out, I'm an affiliate of them. Like I would encourage all of you, okay, to please go test out Logos. If you need help learning it, I've been a coach for years on it. I know it in and out. I'm going to be teaching in the next month or so all of the pastors in our church, which is a dozen plus some additional leaders in the facility. I'm going to be teaching them how to use the software better. I understand it. I'm very well versed at Logos Bible Study software. Do I know it all? No. But the only reason I'm able to do some of what I'm able to do is because of the tools that I use. They're not special. You can get access to them too, okay? Part of my bone that I have to pick with ADL is they use archaic tools. And so I'm encouraging them, friends, if you want to level up your perspective and opinions and really test what you think and what you believe, you need to level up your tools, okay? So I say that because the program that I'm in, so I've already done a semester of my program, but in that semester, I clept out of enough classes to currently I have 24 hours, credit hours. I only took one class last semester. It was 2 hours. Actually, so it's 25, I think 25 hours. Anyways, at any rate, I clept out of like 9 classes, 9 to 10 classes. And what that means is I tested out of them. All of the classes I tested out of, for the most part, were all of the expositional classes on Old Testament, New Testament books, the minor prophets, major prophets, Pauline theology, eschatology. Well, I haven't done eschatology, but some of the corpuses, the gospels, like all that stuff. And so that was only possible because of the amount of personal study I've done since 2015. Where the fun really begins. So I'm in 3 classes this semester. 2 of them are history classes. One is the history of the early church. The second one is the history of doctrine. And then I have a third one that's going to be on ministry leadership. So those, I'm taking 9 hours, and I'm very grateful that because of that, I also qualify for a scholarship with DTS, which is awesome and very helpful. But starting the last semester of this year will be my dive into the language world. It is a requirement in the DTS program, the THM program, that I will be taking 5 semesters of Greek and 4 semesters of Hebrew. Okay. And I share this because that's just the beginning. Okay. By the time I'm finished, it is required that I exegete in the original language, not with tools, exegete scripture in the original language. Okay. Not everyone needs to do that. I'm not saying everyone needs to do that. I'm not saying you need to become a scholar. Okay. But what I am saying, and this is really a call up to people like Kevin Morgan, to people like ADL, if you're going to engage in this arena of academic pursuit, if you're going to act like you know, if you're going to posit to your audience that you know, you owe it to them to actually put in the work. Don't just pretend, put in the work. And again, I don't know what they do. Okay. I can tell you personally that I'm pretty certain that several of them don't do any of it. Okay. I don't think Jason or Randy, even though they always put the doctor up next to them, I don't think they're doctors of anything in theology. I think one is a musician and one is an MD. So I don't really know what Edwin does. I don't know what his pursuits are. I'll leave that to him. Which university? So this is Dallas Theological Seminary out of Dallas, Texas. And the most common question I get when people ask about this is, "Oh, isn't that a dispensational?" Yes, okay. the theology of, and let me just explain how academics work. Every school holds certain positions that their professors have to agree to. That does not mean students have to abide by them. Okay, it would be like I'll give you a good example in the Adventist world. Okay, most of you might know Samuel Bacchiocchi. Samuel Bacchiocchi got one of his doctorates, I think, from a Catholic school. I think Gregory, I don't remember which one. Does that make him Catholic? Okay. No. Okay. So don't get too absorbed by that. That doesn't mean I'm actually not, I don't consider myself dispensational. The closest I ever get to dispensationalism would be maybe what they would call progressive dispensationalism. And there's all kinds of different veins of dispensationalism. Dispensationalism is not a denomination. It's just a lens through which you view and interpret what most see covenant theology or covenantalism through, but it's a lens through which you kind of interpret. Okay, it's a view that you see things through. And some ascribe to it, some don't. Whether or not you're dispensational or not doesn't make you Christian or not. So it is what it is. Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm going to take that red pill. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to work through some of this. I want to set this up initially. This is I don't know how much time we'll have on this. If we only got 45 minutes or so, that's great. We'll work through as much of this as we can. I've got a bunch of stuff prepared, but I want to dive into this video. And I just want to be very clear in the onset that my goal here is not to pick sides. It's not to pick on or be mean-spirited. The reason that I engage in these types of videos is because it helps me build the muscle of critiquing theology and testing it. Now, I want you to know what my methodology is when I'm going into this so that you're very, very clear, okay? I'm going to approach this in a way that I have not done prior, okay? But I'm going to approach this in a methodology that kind of has a specialized focus on the cognitive environment and very careful approach to linguistic study. Linguistic is just language. I want to give you a couple of core principles, okay, core ideas as I engage in this. You're welcome to write these down if you want. If you want to make these, everyone has a methodology, okay? When you approach scripture, I don't care if you know what the term means or not. Everyone approaches the text with a certain set of presuppositions. You cannot approach the text without them. The problem arises when you don't know what your presuppositions are. Okay, those becomes blinders to you or for you. So here's what I'm trying to accomplish. I want to prioritize in my probing of what's said. I want to prioritize the original context. If we're going to engage in biblical texts, my goal is to do my best to address, probe, to question in such a way that I'm exposing either my own modern perspective or their modern perspective, such that I can kind of eradicate my modern eyes, especially my personal, like American eyes, and hopefully let the original text. Now, what do I mean by the original context? What do I mean by that? The central tenet that I want you to know for me is to understand how an ancient Israelite would have read the text. We call the Bible the Bible. We call it the Word of God. We call it, inspired. We say these things about the text, and we rarely think about what was the view of the ancient reader. Okay, how did they view these things? They didn't have a Bible. Most of these texts were not canonized by the time these were being read. Okay, especially the Old Testament. Okay, they're sacred texts, and they're sacred texts to the Hebrew community, to the Judaic community, to the Israelite community, to the post Christ, the Christian community. So just keep that in mind. We're trying. In fact, on the back of my truck, I have a sticker that says "Think like an Israelite." And my wife always says, no one's going to understand. No one's going to get what you mean by that. Well, that's kind of the point. Okay. I've never had anyone ask me what that means, but that is part of my core tenet, is to always think like an Israelite when we're engaging. Don't think like an early church father. Don't think like an 1800 Christian. Don't think like a modern, postmodernism Christian. Try to think like an Israelite, and try to put aside some of those assumptions, the modern assumptions. Okay. Now, if you know anything about Dr. Heiser, I got this from him. If it's weird, it's probably important. There's probably not going to be a lot of weird things in what we. There's going to be a little. There's not going to be a lot of weird things in what we uncover today. But I want you to know that for me, one of the methodological positions that I hold is the words, the stories, the things that made it into the canonized scripture. They're all there for a reason. All of them. And so, if it's weird, don't just run from it. It's okay to sit in it. It's okay to feel weird. It was a different culture. It was a different time. It was a different perspective, all that stuff. Okay. So if it's strange, confusing, we're not going to ignore it. We're going to go right after it. There's not going to be a lot of that today, but I want you to kind of know my perspective. If you've been a part of my Bible study, you know that I'm a big fan of inductive Bible study. It's not the end all. Okay. But the reason the inductive process is helpful is it helps to push off many of the presuppositions that we have. Not all. Okay. But this particular method, the inductive method, of gathering all the relevant biblical data on a specific subject, on a theme, on an issue across all the different, corpuses, across the different literature, the entire canon, Second Temple literature, all the different things that might add to the immediate context of the thing that created the text that we're reading, okay, helps us to be honest with what the text actually is before drawing conclusions. Okay. A very easy example of this is, the Adventist position on judgment, the investigative judgment. That is an anachronistic concept that is completely foreign, entirely foreign from any author of Scripture. Now, I understand that Adventists will say that it's biblical. I get that. Okay. I understand. But that's because it's being deduced into the text. The position is held that this is what it is. And then it's inserted into it. In fact, that's the exact way the doctrine became a thing. Okay. Is because of the mistake of the Millerite movement, and then the interpretation of that with the first Advent group, and then Ellen White took a handle on it, and so on and so forth. Now, the last main thing, these are the four principles that I kind of hold to in this conversation and ongoing, is I will be integrating ancient Near Eastern literature into what it is that we're dialoguing on. Now, some people squirm with ancient Near Eastern concepts, literature, worldview, whatever it is. I'm not going to engage in why. Um, we can have those dialogues at another time. I think some of the upcoming episodes with some of the other scholars that I'll have come on with who specialize in some of that stuff will do a better job of explaining why that's important. Okay. But integrating the ancient Near Eastern literature and view into the text, like it requires, in order to do that well, it requires research. It requires exploring religious, cultural, literary parallels. You'll hear me say this a lot. Okay, talking about the parallels. It requires us to look at ancient Mediterranean cultures. That doesn't mean that we have to embody them. It doesn't mean that we have to accept them. But we would be remiss if we chose to study American history and we just chose never to study Hispanic history. We chose never to study any of the histories of any of the immigrants. We're all immigrants, by the way. Or if we just chose to forget about the Native Americans, and we never understood how our culture interacted with and why some of the things happened. Okay, so it's important for context to understand how these cultures interacted, engaged, intertwined at times. And in order to do that, we have to look at things like the Dead Sea Scrolls, the apocryphal literature, pseudepigraphal texts, things that aren't canon, but that are helpful to provide necessary context. Okay, now, before I forget, okay, if any of you are, there will be a link later on that I will post that will have an affiliate link for Logos, because we're going to be heavily diving into Logos. My goal here today, as we finish out this stream, is my hope and desire is that I will encourage a motivated desire to upgrade the tools that you use, not just reading books, the tools that you use to be able to handle questions in a way that honors the text and honors the Word of God. And so I'm gonna show you some scholarly tools, some techniques, some things today. I'm going to integrate that with some of the Logos Bible software. It's going to be casual. We're going to be watching some videos, responding to some of it. If you're new to the channel, welcome, by the way. Glad you're here. But this is what we try to do. We try to focus on scholarly biblical interpretations. We do our best to approach this in a way that honors the text, historical grammatical method, discourse analysis, systematic theology as we get into theological things. And so today we're going to be very rigorous as we end this show. We're going to be very engaged in this. And I don't want to start into this without a quick word of prayer as we kind of dive in. So let's bow our heads real quick and then we'll dive in. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for the opportunity. I pray that you would send your Holy Spirit to guide and direct, be with those that are watching in their lives. We all carry heartaches. We all carry major decisions, struggles, challenges. We know that ultimately, because of your word, we know that you are victorious. We know that you reign seated at the right hand of God. We know that we can have the gift of eternal life by accepting the gift through Jesus Christ, our sacrifice. And I just pray that each one watching would know you on a deep level, would accept you, would be united with the body of Christ by their sovereign loyalty to you, by accepting you, by having faith in you. I pray that today would be honoring of you, that as we engage and critique, that it would not be about the people, it would be about the theological statements, and that we would grow together, we would learn together, and we would most importantly honor you with what we do, say, and think. We pray all these things. Amen. Okay, let's dive in. Now, we're going to kick it off. The video that we're going to be looking at is I'm going to take the comment off for just a second. The video that we're going to be looking at here, I want to go to, you're going to have to bear with me because I'm going to go to kind of a time stamp. Let's see. I'm going to take off the comment or the sub. All right. Now, can y'all just let me know, make sure that you can hear? This is coming straight from, I just want to make sure that you hear it well and that there's no echo. So just let me know for sure as we get in here.
But it says, shall we sin even though we are not under the law? Now, what is sin? 1 John 3:4, right? 1 John 3:4, the Bible says that sin is the transgression of the law. So what it's saying is, what then? Okay, whosoever committed sin transgresses all the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. So go back to Romans 6:14, or sorry, 15. I'm sorry. So my understanding would be, what then? Shall we transgress the law because we are not under the law, but under grace? God forbid.
Okay. Now, first of all, we're gonna go straight to the text here. Okay. We're gonna bring up the text. We're in Romans 6. Okay. 14, 15. Randy's argument here, okay, he kind of, the specific clip I want you to get is the way he emphasized, okay, this happens a lot, okay, it's inserting an idea by the way you're reading and communicating the text, okay? What then shall we sin because we are not under the law, but by grace? God forbid. Now, I want you to catch that one of the things that was said was that Randy gave a definition of what sin was. Now, if you want to read, I have an article on my website that addresses the definition of sin. What Randy said is not actually the definition of sin. It is one of about 8. There's sins of omission, commission, like there's all different types of sin. Okay. And this is part of my issue with this entire engagement with ADL that they were engaging in is most of their arguments were very stripped down and neutered from the complexity of Paul's arguments. Okay, so Randy's treatment here of Romans 6, 14 and 15. I'm going to read it again. For sin, now we're already taking this out of context by just reading 2 verses. Okay, this is Romans. It's a complex discourse letter, and all of his arguments fit. This is why people spend their entire PhDs in Pauline theology, because it's complicated. But one of the things that happened in this live stream was it was oversimplified with a couple of proof texts to make a claim that lines up with their perspective to then make the statement that they want to make. Now, what I will say is Randy does, okay, that there is a positive here. I think he does correctly identify that we are, that not under the law doesn't equal, this is a common thing I hear, antinomianism. The very first thing I was told by an Adventist friend, a pastor, one of my close friends, is that he basically called me an antinomian. Because the common response that people will say is that, oh, so you're saying that because you don't believe that we're under the law, that means you can now go do what you want. No, Paul actually addresses that in his argument. He actually knows that people are going to say that. Actually says, God forbid, no, that it doesn't give us a license to sin. Okay, that's not the argument. When someone says we're no longer under the law, that doesn't mean or equate to, well, you can do whatever you want now. That's not what it means. Okay. And I agree with Randy, and I think Edwin goes on and says a few things as well. I think that's important. But there is an aspect. Remember what I told you my methodology was. There is an aspect of this argument that these three guys never engage in. And it's called the halakhic categories of Jewish law. It's the way things get distinguished between creation ordinances and covenant stipulations and moral principles inside of Jewish thought. Now remember, you and I might have a perspective of this text. It's probably not going to be the perspective of Paul because we aren't Paul. It's probably not even going to be, it might be close, but it probably never is going to be completely accurate with regards to the recipients of the letter, because we're in a different culture, a different year, different time, different environment, different language, different all this stuff. Okay. That doesn't mean that we can't do our best to try to uncover it. So I want to use Logos to help us explore some of this. Okay. There's a tool in Logos called the Study Assistant. Now, there are good ways and bad ways to use AI. One of the really nice ways that Logos has incorporated is the use of AI exclusively inside your resources. The AI in Logos does not go out to the web. It doesn't interact with websites. It doesn't do any of that. Okay. You'll notice at the bottom here, I can engage in my own books. I think they're eventually going to adjust this, or you can engage in all books. Now, for me, I'll just show you guys this. Okay. My books, okay, inside of Logos, you'll see in the upper left here, I have 32,464 books. Some of those it's actually more than that. I've hid some of them because they're languages I just have no interest in engaging. I don't have the ability to engage in those languages. And that would be things like Chinese and like things that I'm not going to ever engage in. But of the 32,500 books that I have, Logos has like almost 300,000. So I can choose to engage in all of the books. Now, if I don't have the book, obviously I'm not going to be able to look at it, but I still am able to access the content and to have the AI give me a response that is supported by a book. And you'll see what I mean in just a second. Okay. Part of the reason Logos is so powerful, number one, yes, it's the tools, but the second part that makes Logos so powerful is the amount of resources you have. A person that has 32,000 books, there's no way you could read all of them. The point isn't to read all of them. The point is to have reference points that you can, and a place, an ability to access parts of those books in a way that's very quick. Okay. And I'm going to show you how we do this. Now, we already got into, if I'm studying Romans, for example, okay, and I'm trying to think like an Israelite, I'm trying to think like a pagan Christian, like a converted Christian. I'm Roman, okay? I'm trying to think like an Israelite or a Jew. And so you and I might see the word, for example, law, okay? Now, you have an opinion of what law is. In fact, if you're from America, and this might be true across other contexts as well, you probably think of law as a checklist of things. Okay. As long as you do these things, you're good. If you break these things, you're not good. And more than likely, the three-letter word law in English probably connects to a penal system in your mind. Now, there's lots of debate on whether or not that's the way they would have viewed it. Okay, because there was not the same penal system during the Jewish context. So my first question that pops into my head when I read this, if I'm trying to be honest with the text, for sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under law, but under grace. Okay, well, let's not rip this out of context. Let's just find out, what does it mean? What are the different categories of law with regards to Second Temple Judaism? Second Temple Judaism was kind of the period of time that, specifically the period of time that the New Testament kind of came out of. It was that interim time between the Old and the New, which really is the framework by which most of the New Testament authors kind of dealt in. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask a question to my little assistant here. And I'm going to say, can you help me understand Second Temple Judaism law categories? I want you to notice what happens, okay? I'm going to take a drink while we do this. Cheers. Happy New Year. Okay. Now, what's important here when you're doing research, okay? Number one, don't go to Google, please. Stop going to Google. It's fine. I'm not saying you can't, but be careful, because most of Google does not access academic resources. It accesses, even with mine. I mean, my website is not an academic resource. Okay. It's my opinions. It's a blog. Okay. So what I find helpful about this, that spurs research and understanding, because I want to learn. I don't want to just regurgitate someone else's ideas. I want to learn. And so what's helpful here is this sentence or this paragraph, okay, where we're going to learn some stuff. Second Temple Judaism organized its legal system into distinct functional categories rather than a single unified code. Laws specific to the Holy Land fell into 5 main groups. Those tied to temple operations and worship, including sacrifices, priestly services, pilgrimage festivals, regulations governing civil, military administration, statutes addressing agricultural production and land use. Again, we're talking about law codes, okay, categories of law codes. This would be no different than saying we have in America, we have civil law code, we have traffic law codes. We have, again, you get the idea, right? Encompassing judicial matters, calendar calculations. If you've seen my series on Revelation, you'll know that we've talked about that, in criminal justice. Well, this reference point right here tells me that this is coming from a resource. That resource is Isidore Singer, the Jewish Encyclopedia. So all I would need to do is click that resource, and it would actually take me to, and you'll see it's highlighted here, it would take me to, this is under Palestine law and customs relating to, and you can read, okay, the details. Now you'll notice different law codes, okay, that's going to be talked about relating to Yom Kippur and capital punishment and all this stuff. Now remember, this is Palestine. This is Second Temple. Okay. This is going to be more apropos to Paul's culture than Old Testament law code. Okay, because law codes adjust and change as culture changes. Okay. And they go on, the interpretive framework underlying these. And I just want you to understand the way my research works. Okay. So as I get ideas and responses, then I'm going to look at these particular references down here. These are all references I have, okay? I might get a different response with different books if I expand it to all, all of the books, almost 300,000, but I won't be able to access some of them because I don't own them. Now, Logos does that because if you do like it, then it makes it good marketing to purchase their resources. So notice that what comes in here, the diversity of legal interpretation across sects. I think I can make this bigger for you guys. Ooh, that's maybe a little better. Let's see. Many Second Temple Jewish interpreters understood Israel's law. Again, Second Temple Jewish interpreters, okay, understood the law as cultivating virtues like kindness and equity. Where do we get this from? Well, this is going to come from David Stark, and this is out of the Lexham Bible Dictionary on the interpretation of the law. And notice what this deals with. Many Second Temple Jewish leaders interpreted Jewish law as endeavoring unity virtues. Okay. Notice the reference, Josephus' Antiquities, Philo, on the Decalogue, on special laws. You've got people like Pharisees, Sadducees. Both of those were tense because they dealt with different parts of the law. The Sanhedrin was kind of a body that dealt with certain parts of the law. And then you have the Qumran community. Okay, for instance, down here, some Jews believe that only members of a particular sect were faithful Jews. For instance, the community at Qumran seems to have understood themselves as uniquely characterized by true and full obedience to the law. This is the Qumran community where we get all the Dead Sea Scrolls. As such, they considered only those who adhered to their particular laws as being approved by Yahweh. Now, does that seem like, okay, I'm not trying to apply to us today, but I want you to understand that inside the culture, when you're reading something like Romans, inside the culture of that text, the socio-rhetorical culture of that text, the people, the livelihood, the worldview, the political system, like everything that makes the culture that it's being written in, there's a lot going on. There's a viewpoint, there's a vantage point, there's a perspective. And it is most certainly not your viewpoint. It's most certainly not my viewpoint. Paul is not talking to a Caucasian male in Northwest Arkansas. Okay, he's not. Okay, he would be saying it differently. Okay, and so we have to, when we do research, and I'm saying this because most of Edwin's, ADL's arguments are either borderline out of context or completely out of context because they don't address the actual core of the culture that's going on. It's just modernized. And they say things like, well, what's the definition of sin? It's the breaking of the law. No, that's not actually. That is a definition given in the context of a book during a discourse that's being made for an argument. But it is not the exclusive definition of what sin is. Okay. And again, I have an article where I go through that. Law is complex. No, law is not just the Decalogue. No, it's highly simplistic. It's not accurate. Okay, and I'm going to show some of those in the context of our discussion. Now, one thing that's nice about the study assistant, not only does it give you access and engagement, okay, I don't have to read all these books, but you can continue to talk to it, okay? I want to ask a follow-up question, and there's a reason for this question, okay? When we go to Romans, let me go back to our screen share here. When you go to Romans and you're looking at the law, okay, I want you to notice that this term law It comes from a very specific Greek word. It's nomos, okay? Now, if I were to perform a search on nomos, and you can see the context menu, I'm not going to explain this context menu for searching, but again, it's highly exacting in how and what you can do inside of this program. So I'm gonna pinpoint the Greek word nomos. That's the lexical word. It's not the manuscript word. The manuscript word is nomon, which is a noun. Edwin does in the video properly state that words have lexical kind of domains. So just like run has multiple definitions, the term nomos, which would be the lexical dictionary definition of the word, has several different semantic domains. The irony is that when he does engage in this lexical argument, he makes a fallacy when he does it. He doesn't actually engage in the lexical argument. He just kind of makes a statement so that the audience, I think he's hoping the audience agrees that what he's doing is right, but it isn't. Okay. It's just poor academics. So I'm going to look at this term here, and I'm going to do what's called a Bible word study. Now, you'll see here in this chart that what we have is the word in the upper left hand, which is nomos, the Greek word. That Greek word in the NRSV updated edition can be translated in multiple different ways. Now, you'll notice that predominantly the way this word gets translated is law or laws or laws, whether it's got apostrophe or not. If you click the center of this ring, it will then show you all of, okay, this term gets used 380 times in the New Testament, okay? I'm going to isolate this only to Romans, because if you're really trying to isolate Paul's theological arguments specifically to his discourse in Romans, then you need to isolate the language just to that. So this is only in Romans. So you'll see that in Romans, in the NRSV, it only gets translated one way, and that's law. You'll notice in the upper right-hand side, there's a small little 74. If I click this, you'll see that there are 74 instances where it's always translated LAW. Nomos is always translated in Romans LAW. Now, you could make the mistake, okay, looking at this, you could make the mistake to think that nomos is only used in the context of law. Well, what law? What does that even mean? You understand that we already looked at Second Temple literature, and it's highly complicated. There's lots of different categories and venues. So what law? How do we know what law he's talking about? Is he talking about the Mosaic law? Is he talking about a different law? Is he talking about like the law of marriage? What law is he talking about? Now, if you broaden out, okay, if you want to look at, you can look at Pauline theology, okay, and this would be the Pauline epistles, all of his letters that he wrote. You can see he uses this term, nomos, pretty much the same way Paul does, okay? And that is in Romans, he uses it in, by the way, 74 times in Romans. He talks a lot about the law, okay? He uses it in 1 Corinthians. He uses it in Galatians, okay? He uses it in, let's see where else. Ephesians one time. Notice that's the reference here to abolishing the law with its commandments and ordinances, okay? In Philippians, it's used 3 times, and in 1 Timothy, it's used twice. So it's translated a specific way, but how do we know the context? Because law can be lots of things. So how do we know the context of what that term actually means? Okay. Well, we'll find that out in just a second. Now, I want to look at the New Testament at large. The New Testament at large almost exclusively, and this is in the NRSV, okay? It may not be the same again, this is just the English word that's being translated for nomos. I want you to understand that. In the NRSV. If you wanted to look at KJV or if you wanted to look at NIV, I mean, I've got like 400 Bibles. So you can look at how the different Bibles translate the word and what's being used, okay? One of my biggest pet peeves about the way ADL tends to engage, and I'll pick on them in a little bit, not in a demeaning way, but I'm going to pick on their arguments, is that in order to handle the text well, what you shouldn't be doing is you should not go to a definition, read the couple of different words that possibly it can be, pick the one you like Decalogue, and then say, see, that's what it is. That's horrible handling of the Word of God. And it's the same methodology, honestly, it's the same methodology that William Miller did, because it was just him, his KJV, and his concordance. He used some other stuff as well, but there's one instance here where legal is used, okay? So if you go to, and this is in the New Testament, if you go to Hebrews 7:16, you'll notice that one who has become a priest, not through a legal requirement concerning physical descent. Now that term there is nomos. Yes, Adrian, you're 100% correct. Thank you for pointing that out. No matter what translation you use, and this is why you need to get access to the original language, because no matter the translation, manuscripts don't differ oftentimes, at least not on these types of things. Manuscripts don't differ in these types of words. There will be scribal differences a little bit here and there, and there'll be some things that aren't in some, okay, verses that are left out because some are scribally edited or whatever it might be. But the underlying word, the Greek word, is the same across all the translations, all the manuscripts, for the most part. So it is interesting that for the most part, the word is translated law, but it can be translated legal. Now, if we just open up our search, let's see, where did the Bible search here. Let's just do all passages. Now, all passages in this particular Bible is going to include the deuterocanonical books, because this is the NRSV updated edition has the additional deuterocanonical books in them. So you're going to notice there are places where this word, okay, this is 2 Maccabees 5. This is actually nomos right here. No place right there in the tomb. I don't know why it got translated that way. Okay. I'm not a translator, but the underlying word nomos is there. Okay. You'll see this in several other places. Manner, 3 Maccabees. You're going to see in the same manner. Okay. Now you might not, in the same law. Well, they didn't translate it. The king, however, convened the banquet in the same law. Well, you can see that maybe in the same method and the same ceremonial process and the same I just want you to understand that lexical arguments are complicated. And if you're going to engage in making statements about terms, you have to do your work diligently. Okay. Now, there's a follow-up question I'm going to ask my study assistant. And that is, how would Paul's audience, remember I told you we're going to keep this in the Israelite, mindset. How would Paul's audience have understood nomos within Second Temple Judaism? And we're going to hit search. These are in my books. We're going to see what comes up. Sometimes I get good hits, sometimes not. Okay. And we're going to take another drink. Okay, so here's what we get. Paul's audience would have encountered nomos as a multivalent term rooted in their Jewish context. That's very helpful. But shaped by Greek philosophical discourse. Now this is helpful. This is really helpful, okay? In Greek biblical usage, nomos typically referred to the Torah. Catch that. In Greek biblical usage, nomos typically referred to the Torah as a comprehensive set of rules governing life. Yet this straightforward definition conceals deeper complexity. Now, here's what I want to say to that real quick. What's the Torah? Okay, because we say a conclusive, it typically refers to a conclusive set of governing kind of laws. The Torah is what? It's the Torah. It's the first five. It's the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Okay, it's not. Okay, when we say law, if you have if you're in the context of a Second Temple Jew, if you're reading this from the perspective of a Roman converted, again, it might have a little bit of Greek philosophical perspective on what law means, but if you're a Jew specifically, the context for law for you in your framework, in your mental cognitive framework, is not the Decalogue. Did you hear what I said? When a Jew heard law, they didn't think Decalogue. Now, when an Adventist hears law, they think Decalogue. But that's not the cognitive framework of the audience that Paul is writing to. He's not writing to an Adventist in the 21st century, let alone the late 18th, 19th century. Okay, let's go back to this text real quick, and then we'll move on to another video section. For Paul's Jewish listeners, now notice that these are coming from resources from my library, okay? This is actually a really good resources put out by Brill. Brill is a top-notch. I mean, if you can get anything for Brill, it's usually expensive, but it is top-notch stuff, okay? But this book is probably one of the top 10 books I would tell you to get. If you want a reference book to help take your study to the next level, you need to get the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible. You need to get it. It's thick. It's huge. It's massive. Okay. It's a thick book. But this is the entry on nomos, which we don't have time. Okay. If you want to read this, scan the code, jump into Discord. I'm happy to share some of this with you. But this works through a lot of the details of this. Okay. Back to the study assistant here for a second. Oh, my Logos just decided to crash on me. Too much Bible study. Too much Bible study. Give me a second. It'll kick back up here. So what I want to get to is it's really important to keep, when you're doing word studies, which word studies are helpful, don't get me wrong. But when you're doing word studies, it's really important to keep your word studies as best you can in the context of the environment of both the author and the recipient. Okay. There's an argument to be made biblically speaking, I'm not going to go into this tonight, but there is an argument to be made that even the stones, when Moses came down from the mountain, I don't think the stones just had 10 words on them. By the way, it's not the 10 commandments, it's the 10 words. Okay. There's a really good argument, biblically speaking, that what was written on those tablets were all the laws, the 613 laws. And we know it was front and back, okay, because scripture says it was written on the front and the back of the tablets. Now, just as a fun fact, that's an immediate contradiction to Ellen White, because Ellen White says that they were only written on the front and they were folded. She didn't know what she was talking about. I think she was on something when I'm trying not to do any ad hominem attacks on her. But it's difficult when someone makes comical statements like that that are just very clearly non-biblical. Okay. I'm not going to go into the details on that. Let me get back to, let me see if I can pull up my previous, let's see here. Yeah, here we go. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Probably shouldn't have these comments up while we're doing this. All right. So this is where we were at. We were looking at the Dictionary of Deities. So I'm going to just keep reading some of this. Okay. Torah signified the Mosaic legislation or Pentateuch, while the Greek term nomos served as its standard translation, despite having broader semantic range, lots of different definitions. However, the Pharisees possessed authoritative oral traditions standing alongside written Torah, with these traditions carrying weight insofar as they applied the written law. Now, that's going to be in a book that's Michael Bird. Okay. That's a reference book there. It's Who Do My Opponents Say That I Am? An investigation of the accusations against historical Jesus, in a segment called Jesus as a Lawbreaker. Michael Bird is an Anglican priest, I believe. All right. This meant Paul's audience understood law not as a static text, but as an interpretive practice, a living framework requiring constant exegetical engagement. Now, this is really important, okay? Before I even get into their, and I really do mean they for the most part butchered this whole concept, okay? ADL did. But before I even get into any of that, I want you to understand that the law for a Jew, when you do the research and understand the cognitive framework of a Jew, it was very complex. It wasn't meant of, the law was not just the Decalogue. That's not what the law was. The law was much more complicated. It was more the framework that drove all of their life. It dealt with all the laws. Yes, there was some oral law as well, but the oral law was designed to support the written law. The rabbinic oral law, some scholars will claim, and I think there's some positive notes to this, that when Jesus came, that he was really more engaging in the oral rabbinic laws that kind of became the weight, so to speak. But needless to say, the law was not just the 10 words, the Decalogue for a Jew. Now, I know the Adventists like to break up categories and say this, that, whatever. That's an anachronistic approach. That's not doing good research. And I understand. I saw a comment today from, I don't know where, somewhere. I understand that the mainstream Christian approach is to break up the different laws. into categories. I understand that's the mainstream approach. That just because it's mainstream doesn't mean it's right. Okay. So I don't believe that a Jew understood the law as being broken up. And part of the reasons, if you study their Jewish concepts and you study their culture, it's very difficult to categorize certain laws. Even a law like the Sabbath, for example. Here's a good way to look at it. Is the Sabbath a moral law? If you categorize the Sabbath as moral, then the argument there is, if it's a moral law, what I mean by a moral law is that it is a law that is an obligation to anyone of any age, ethnicity, because if you break it, you're immoral. Okay. A moral law would be something like murder. Okay. No matter if you're religious or not, most cultures see murdering someone as morally inappropriate. Most cultures, not all, most cultures see taking another man's wife as immoral. It means you're breaking a moral code. Okay. Question is Sabbath moral? Well, if you classify it as moral, if it really is, okay, let's just go with the argument for a second. Let's say Sabbath keeping is moral. What that means is it's always immoral, no matter if you know about it or don't know about it. It's always immoral if you break it. And we know that this just isn't the case, because we know there are instances of stories like Naaman, for example, was a pagan. He came to know Yahweh through the whole dipping in the river. And what did he say? I will worship the one true God. And he goes back to his country. He's a pagan. He doesn't become a Sabbatarian. He doesn't keep the moral law. He breaks it. He actually, if you read the story, he actually helps his king worship another god. But Naaman claims that he will always continue to worship the one true God. And he does that because he actually takes back dirtfuls, as there's a whole theology around it. He takes donkeyfuls of dirt. The methodology behind that is because in order to worship a god, you must be on their turf. Now, we're getting sidetracked, but my point is, if you begin to cut these laws up, Sabbath, if it's moral, then anyone, it doesn't matter if you know about it or not. If you're not keeping it, you're immoral, therefore you're sinning. If you were to categorize the Sabbath, it would probably be more logically coherent to categorize it as a ceremonial or ritualistic law. And yeah, so Adrian, to your point, okay, Leviticus 18 isn't entirely ceremonial, but actually contains moral law not found in the Decalogue. There's no real way. It's a poor argument to make the claim that the Decalogue is moral. Now, I know there are traditions that make that claim. I don't buy it. Okay. I don't think it's taking into account the entire cognitive framework of the Jewish worldview. I don't think it's taking into account the complexities of what it means for the law. So I want you to understand, and we'll just finish out with, I hope that, just let me know if my video is lagging at all, because it seems to be on my side, but it may not be for you all. So the broader Hellenistic context enriched this understanding further. In antiquity, legal, ethical, and religious senses of nomos could not be easily separated, since all goods came from the gods who upheld cosmic order, a conviction linking law to the divine. Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting... Here, let me see if I shut down a few things here, if it clears up. Give me a second here. I'm just going to close down. Yeah, it says, I thought it was lagging just a little bit. Let me just see if I adjust some of this, take some of the load off. I don't know why it's... I'm not sure why it's lagging. Oh, let me... Give me a second here, guys. Yeah, it's lagging for some reason, and I don't know why. Oh, I think I do know why. My Logos started indexing. Let me see if that clears up. I don't know why it started indexing right in the middle of... I don't know. Maybe, did that clear up? Let me know. Okay, so part of what I wanted to teach you all is when Mike does research, I don't just make arguments willy-nilly. I don't just on the fly make discussions. I'm trying to be methodical about my engagement. I don't like, and this is another reason why I tend not to go on like an ADL channel or have them come on and do like live debating, because in order to do that properly, it need to be properly managed, but also it would require preparation. Like you got to be prepared for that kind of stuff in order to do the discussion appropriately. Otherwise, in order to do it well, it would be come on and actually work through arguments and see where they get fleshed out and see what the texts say and work through and all that stuff. I just don't like misleading people. And so I want to make sure my arguments are grounded. What I'll say as we exit out of this particular segment is that Paul's audience, and I hope you've seen this in the arguments that we've seen so far in the study assistant in Logos. Paul's audience would have understood multiple semantic domains for the term nomos that we see as law. And it would be, I'm going to give you 4. There might be more, okay? Torah as covenant system. You have Torah as moral content. You have Torah as condemnation principles. And then you have natural law principles. All of those get wrapped up into this word nomos. So we have to, as students, as students of the word, when we're engaging in Romans, Romans 6, I'll get this on the screen again. when we're engaging in the word and we see, just quickly go through here. Well, let me do it this way. I'm going to go through and show you, okay? Let's see, law. If we go through and just look for this term in, and I'm going to do just in Romans, okay? When we come across this, the first time we come across this is in chapter 2. So he's already building a case for his concept. But just because we see law doesn't mean he's referring to the same law every single time. We're going to see this actually when he makes the argument. And Edwin talks about this argument with regards to an analogy that comes up in Romans with marriage. And his argument gets conflated, Edwin's argument, because he's not understanding the nuances of this. Even though he claims that he understands the lexical semantic domains, all that stuff, he's not applying it, okay? Okay. So my last kind of final statement is that the tendency for ADL is that they conflate these domains, and it creates, when I say domains, it's semantic domains of the word nomos, okay, law. And it creates this interpretive confusion that doesn't just permeate their discussion, but it actually permeates the entire Adventist framework. And that's problematic. Now, for the time, I'm just realizing we've already been on for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Holy cow. All right. Y'all having fun yet? Let's go to the next video clip. 49. I'm going to start it a little bit before, okay? The reason why I want to show this one is that we're going to see we're going to see the argument. Again, remember that they claim that they're going to keep this lexical word study, all this stuff in context, but we're going to see a mistake that's made, okay? And by the way, I don't really understand why he's, Edwin has this behind and some of this other stuff. I think it's to prop up kind of, so people think he understands Hebrew. I don't think he does very well. But again, that's not an attack on him as a person. I'm just looking at his arguments. Okay. All right. So here we go.
Also see how the author is using that word. I'm going to give you an example of this. Okay. You guys are going to love this. Jay, Randy, you guys are going to love this. Watch this. Let me show you this. All right. The word love, go to 1 John chapter 5, Bible study. The word love. What does the word love even mean in the Greek? Go to 1 John 5:3. Look up the Greek word for love.
All right, let's go. So, for this is the love of God. G26, agape. Agape.
Okay, so again, I'm prefacing this. I'm not picking on these three men, okay? But I want you to understand their arguments. And I want you to understand that, notice what was said. Edwin said, we're going to do Bible study. You're going to love this, okay? So he thinks he's onto something. And he's asking them to go to the original language, okay? Now, I want you to notice what Edwin does, what Jason and Edwin do when they identify the Greek word. Remember, they said we have to look at it in context, okay? Here we go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's the word agape. Look, what does it mean? It means love, that is affection, benevolence, a love feast, right? So now imagine somebody saying, oh, you know what love means in this verse? All it means is a love feast. All it means is benevolence or affection. Wait a minute, but look at the verse and how it's used in context by the author. Go back to it now without the Greek words and notice what it says. This is the love of God, that we do what? Keep his commandments.
Okay. So they're making a horrible mistake here. I don't disagree with the fact that what they looked at in the previous screen was gloss English words for the King James Version. That's what their concordance does. Okay. Concordance that they're looking at, by the way, they're using eSword, which is it's a free resource, but it's not a great use of resources if you really want to study the Word of God. It's a good entrance point, but I don't think you should stop there. So those are Greek, those are gloss words where he was reading love feast, all that stuff. That's just what the King James Bible uses to translate the word. That isn't necessarily what it means. That's just the gloss English. Now, pay attention to what he does, because he's going to say that in the context, this love has to do with commandments. Okay.
So you see how you got to go beyond what the literal lexical definition is. You've got to ask yourself, how is the author using the word? Yes, the word love means benevolence, love feast. It does mean that affection. It does mean that. But how is he using it? To the author here, to him, it's a practical thing. It means to keep God's commandments. You don't see that in the lexical definition, but that's how he's using it.
Okay. We're gonna address this. Okay. 1 John 5:3. Okay. Let's get this back on the screen. 1 John 5:3. If I can type 1 John 5:3. Okay. Now, yes, he's 100% right that agape, okay, that love, that gets translated, okay, he is right to point out that the contextual usage is partially correct. Like he's definitely on to something with regards to that. Okay. But what he fails at, it's not just about lexical discourse. It's about discourse analysis. And it's also about making sure that you're paying attention to the overall context of the original language. Okay. He's doing what I call, he's doing what I would call amateur contextualization. I say amateur, again, this is not a dog on him. I say that because I know that he can tell context matters, but based on what he's doing, that he thinks is keeping it in context, okay, what he's doing shows that methodologically he's weak. It shows that he doesn't have all the tools. It shows that he doesn't have all the resources. It shows he knows it's important, but he doesn't know how to keep it in context. Okay. I want to show you something. I want to show you when it comes to how language works. I want to show you how this functions. We're going to look at what's called a Bible sense lexicon. Now, he is 100% correct that context matters. He's 100% correct in stating that words fit into a semantic range. Okay, words can mean different things. The gloss English words aren't necessarily what those mean. I'm going to show you how this pans out. We're looking at the word agape. Okay, and technically we're looking at, for a Bible sense lexicon, we're looking at the English sense. Okay, so we're looking at the English sense of agape that gets, there's actually a couple other words that get used for it, that would be translated as kind of a strong affection. And I want you to notice that this strong affection sits inside a larger range of words. Okay, so we're looking at this word right here, love and affection, but it sits under a larger domain for emotion that comes from feelings. Now, we're looking at English gloss sense words, but I'm going to show you a resource that does this semantically with the Greek language. Okay, this is just helpful for those of us that don't understand all the Greek. Now, you'll see that the different lemmas that actually can be used for love and affection is not just agape. Okay, you have ahaba. This is in the Hebrew. Ahaba, which actually gets translated to leather. Okay, you have dod, and these are where they get found in the different locations. Yedadat and ahad. Okay, now here's the relationship. It's a type of feeling. It's a type of emotion that comes from feeling, and it's love and affection. Now, there's an antonym to it. You guys know what antonyms are. I want you to understand where it sits inside of like a larger domain, okay? Now, if we look at, now this is true, you can look this up for other things as well. If you just look at love, for example, you can look at, remember love feast was on there, okay? Love feast does not sit in this same domain. So it's improper, and I cannot stress this enough. It gets on my ever-loving nerves when people act like they understand the language, and I'm just cracking the surface, friends. I'm not an expert, okay? But you've got to start, and this is ADL, you've got to start doing better. It's just not, I'm not going to come on and debate you all when you're not even in the same domain when it comes to understanding this stuff. And that's not me being better. I'm not better. Okay. That's not a play. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not trying to be arrogant. Okay. But I've said this. I've literally said the same thing to my family members. I've said this to my dad. Okay. My dad wanted to debate me on something with regards to my understanding of the text and in the Adventist position. And I said, Dad, how many books have you read on this topic? Well, the last book he read was 20 years ago. And it was like 3 Adventist books or something like that. I said, Dad, if I'm going to engage you in this, I don't want to spend hours telling you things that you don't know because you haven't read. You haven't studied. You haven't researched. Now, this is not a dog on my dad. I love him, okay? I love him deeply. But my father does not desire to study these things. He's okay with where he's at theologically, okay? And I'm fine. That's okay. But I'm not going to engage in dialogue and discourse with someone that the whole time I'd have to explain all of this stuff. I'd have to explain how language works. I'd have to explain, no, you can't do that. No, that's not right. No, because it wouldn't be valuable. Okay. And I've said this to Edwin before. You want to debate on the Sabbath? I need you to read all this stuff. I need you to get yourself familiar with it. This is no different than what a formal debate would do. In a formal debate, you find the topic out, you agree on it, you have your different positions, you have the arguments that you're both going to cover both sides, and you discourse on it. It's not a prove the other person wrong. It's, can you defend your position? Okay. And so what I'm trying to share with you all is the defense of my position. And I do it with academic tools. I do it with biblically sourced methodologies. I do it with research. I do it with scholars that are smarter than me. Now, this particular tool, the Bible Sense Lexicon, is very helpful. It's a great visual, okay? But I'm going to show you how to do this. Another way of doing this, in fact, you can do this in the Greek and the Hebrew. It's much easier in the Greek, okay? But if you just look at this word agape, for example, You'll notice that in this context menu, there's the Strong's Greek. I rarely use that. There's this Loneida, okay? Loneida is a semantic domain lexicon by Dr. Lowe and Dr. Nida, and it has become the standard for Greek semantic studies, lexical studies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look this up in the Loneida, okay? Now, I'm going to show you how this lexicon, this is a semantic domain lexicon, okay? And so you can do the same thing in this particular book. What we're looking at here is, you'll see on the left-hand side, this is organized by, you'll see numbers, and you'll see larger kind of domains like communication. These are all the words that fit under the larger domain of communication. When we come down all the way from communication, inside of communication, we have command and order. Actually, here I'm going to be, I don't want to do that. Why did it go there? Hang on just a second. I'm going to come down to 25. Okay, this is 25.43. Where am I at? 25.43. Here we are. Okay, I was in the wrong domain here. So this is under attitudes. The other was nomos. Attitudes and emotions. We already knew that, right? We knew that it was under emotions. And then what? Love and affection, compassion, okay, inside of this domain. And inside of this domain, we have all these Greek words that can fit inside of this domain. Now, inside of this domain, we have this 25.43 that is agape. And it is to have love for someone or something based on sincere appreciation. Okay, notice sincere appreciation. This is a definition by Dr. Lowe and Dr. Nida. Now, notice there are some references to Romans. There's some references to John 21, 1 John 4, okay, 4:19. We're in 1 John 5:3, but it's helpful that they used a section of 1 John to give you kind of a, like, this is what it means. This is an example of how it gets used in this domain where it's talking about love and affection, okay? Now, let's go back to our verse. For the love of God is this. So we're thinking, again, this is in the domain, this is compassion. This is what is the domain language here? This is sitting under, okay, love, affection, compassion. This is to have love for someone or something based on a sincere appreciation and a high regard. Okay. So for the love of God is this, that we obey his now commandments. Now here's the question, friends. Did you notice in the video that Edwin just assumed, he said, we got to keep this in context. And then what did he do? He assumed that commandments mean the Decalogue. That was the assumption. Now, what's the original language here? Well, this is a word that we haven't even encountered yet. This is not nomos. This is entole. So what is entole? Well, let's do the same thing with the semantic domains, okay? We're going to go to Loneida. We're going to look it up, okay, in the Loneida. Notice that the word for entole, okay, sits under the semantic umbrella of command and orders. What are some other things that you can have commands and orders of? Okay, this is actually the word kaleuo, where you get the master ordered. That's an example. That's not what we're using. You can get others. A derivative of to command. Here you have, this is to give detailed instruction. Now, I want you to see that there are lots of different Greek words that fit under the domain, the big, larger context of commands or orders, or a better way to look at this, or another way of looking at this, is like authoritative commands. Okay. Now, what is our word? Well, this is the Strong's word 30, or Lonida word 33.33. Okay. So let's go back to 33.33. Okay. It's down, actually 33.33 is right here. This is a derivative of this word, entolo. Okay. It's a derivative of it, which means to command, that which is authoritative. Okay. This does not necessarily mean the Decalogue. It is it is the authoritative directions or orders or commands of God. Okay. And notice there's a couple of places that they give examples where this comes out. Okay. John 13:34. A new commandment I give you. This is not a new Decalogue. This literally just means a new command, a new authoritative direction, an instruction. I give you a new authoritative instruction. That's the semantic understanding of it. Okay. That's exactly what's going on here. So for the love of God, is of the affection, the high regard that God has, is this. What is it? It's that we obey his authoritative commands. If he asks us to do something, he directs us or says, hey, you need to do this. I want you to do this. He has high regard for us listening and doing the things that he asks. What is not in this text, which is the horrible mistake that Edwin made, what is not in this text is, here is the affection that God has, is that you keep the Decalogue. That's egregious to say that. That's not what's going on. Okay. His authoritative decrees are not burdensome. When he asks you to do something, it's not burdensome. Okay. For whatever is born of God conquers the world. And this is the victory that conquers the world. What is it? Here's the context. Remember, this is what God desires. High regard. What is it? What is it that he regards in high regard? It's that when he asks you to do something, you do it. That's a form of faith. You have faith in him. You have you believe him. You do what it is. Again, all these things, again, if you study it in context, let the text say what it says. Study it in its original context. It should come to the surface. Now, there are times, okay, where the term is exclusively tied to the Mosaic Law. I want to go back to another passage. He's going to jump into Romans 8:4. Now, we're going back and forth a little bit. I'm going to go back a segment. I'm going to go back to 44. So it's 42. Let's see, right back in here. 42. We'll get it right before. And I want you to listen to this. They're doing the same thing here, okay? I want you to listen.
Depending on context. I want you to notice that what William did, he didn't do much of anything if you think about it. He brought up the word. He says, oh, yeah, it's the word pleroo. It's that word. And so you're wrong. That's it. He drew a conclusion based on the word he just popped up in the Greek without bothering to explain it in its proper context, okay, or define it. There's two things that happen in scripture. There is, one, the lexical definition of a term. And then there's two, a definition given by the author of that word in its context. Here we have the lexical definition of a word. But what is the...
By the way, this is not the lexical definition of the word. I want you guys to be clear about the tools he's using. Okay. He is using the Strong's Concordance. That is not the lexical definition. Okay. It is all that Strong's Concordance does is it takes a Greek word And then usually a concordance is tied to a specific Bible. In this instance, this is the Strong's Concordance tied to the KJV. That's the reason why at the bottom it says 90 occurrences. So all that Strong's did was is he basically said, okay, I'm gonna find all the places that this particular word, okay, plero, is used, and then I'm going to put the surface words that the KJV uses to translate it. This is not the lexical definition. None of this defines the lexical definition of the word. All that you're looking at is the gloss terms that the KJV translates when you see that Greek word. None of these necessarily mean what plero means lexically. It's just the English way that the KJV Bible decided, made an interpretive decision when they translated. Now, another thing I want to point out, okay, maybe this will be an extra, a free tip tool, okay, a free tip. I hope I'm not the first to break this to you, but the King James Bible, the KJV, is not a translation of the Bible. I know that it's very near and dear to many of you. I know that many of you use it. I'm not saying you need to stop using it. Okay. I think there's better Bibles, but the King James Bible is not a translation. It is actually a revision of a revision of a revision of a revision. And it's actually a fairly conservative revision. It's not a translation. And the revision dealt with very specific requirements that King James required. Okay, so again, I'm not saying trash it. I'm not saying throw it out. Okay, I don't think it's a good Bible to study from. I think it's possibly, and this might be a little bit brass, but I actually think it can be damaging because not only are the words archaic, I just don't think they're good translation words. I don't think it gets across the terms right. But many times you have what's called false friends inside the KJV. And what that means is there are words in the Old English words that don't mean the same thing today. And they're called false friends. And that just means that it's easy for us to misunderstand it because we see the word, we think it's a certain thing in the English, and we don't understand the context of the Old English. So I want you to understand he's making this, he provides lexical, he provides what he thinks is a lexical definition, but he completely fails, and I mean this, he completely fails to engage the nuances of the eschatological versus the experiential fulfillment of the term that he's using here and looking at. That it's these distinctions, they're very crucial when you look at this. And this is what I consider hermeneutics 101. If you're gonna have in the back of your image there, if you're gonna have a thing that says Hebrew language, you've got to do a better job of bringing actual language arguments rather than just the simple Strong's Concordance like arguments. These just aren't, they're not good arguments, guys. Yeah. All right. This is, I want to get to, man, we have so much that we could talk through and we aren't even getting to it. Let's see. Are there? Yes. Adrian, spot on. If you want to learn more about that, yes. Mark Ward has a fabulous YouTube channel. He's a scholar. Watch all his stuff. He does fabulous debates. He used to be heavy into the debating the KJV only ideas. All right. Let's see here. Let's go to another one. And I'm going to shut it down in about 15 minutes. Let's go to minute and 4 here. Let's go right here. Okay.
And living under the bondage of being under condemnation to God's commandments. Christ, he's the solution. And when you take the law of sin and apply it to a law that God gave through Moses, you're putting the law of sin and death and making God responsible for that. That's blasphemy, heresy. No, the law of sin and death is something that we have when we're not in Christ that can be overcome in the name of Jesus Christ.
Did y'all catch that? Okay, so he said, so when his argument here, and my only thing I'm going to pick on, because I could pick on the theology, but the only thing I'm going to point out here is, so he made this statement. He said, when you take the law of sin, that's a phrase that's used in Pauline theology, especially in Romans. He says, when you take the law of sin and you apply the law of sin to a law that God gave through Moses, he's talking about the Mosaic law, you're putting the law of sin and death and making God responsible for it. And then he makes the statement, that's blasphemy and heresy. Now, these are two big words, okay? These are words that one should not throw around. Yes. There's something about his spirit that, again, I'm careful. I don't want to attack him. Okay. But if you're going to throw around terms like blasphemy and heresy, okay, first of all, what does it mean to blaspheme? Okay. When you blaspheme God, that means you are taking on attributes of God and making them your own. Now, here's another simple way, okay, to use logos. Let's just say that you hear something like this guy on YouTube and you're like, I don't know what to do with it, okay? And you say, what does it mean to blaspheme? Okay. It's really important that I don't like when content creators make these kinds of arguments that they're very aggressive arguments. Okay. And I think that they make them flippantly, or they make them, because again, he's talking about William here, and I'm going to make some presuppositions here. I'm going to make some statements here. Again, this is just my perspective. The Adventist system views Roman Catholicism as evil. Okay. And so anyone who's arguing the Roman Catholic position is going to be seen as, will you blaspheme God? I mean, I used to think that. Okay. So I don't know if that's why he's saying it. I don't know if that's why he's okay, but blasphemy fundamentally involves contemptuous speech or act directed towards God. The term derives from Greek roots meaning to injure and reputation. And you can get some, again, this is actually from the Catholic Encyclopedia if you want to get their definition, okay? Capturing the essence of the offense, it damages the honor owed to the divine. In theological terms, blasphemy encompasses speech, thought, or action that entails contempt for God. Though it is ordinarily expressed in speech, though it may be committed in thought or in act. Now, the offense takes multiple forms. Heretical blasphemy involves insults to God that declare something contrary to faith, such as claiming God is cruel or and unjust. Imprecatory blasphemy invokes curses upon God. And then they go through some of these different things. So I don't know exactly why. Yes, we can, Dexter. Let me get to it in just a second. I've got you. I don't know. I don't know why. Well, I'm going to make a thought here. I think because the Adventist presupposition, the framework of Adventism believes that the Catholic Church has somehow audaciously taken the authority to change Sabbath to Sunday. And so therefore they've blasphemed God. And so I don't know if there's an element of like that coming out. Now, again, he said, okay, when you take the law of sin and apply it to a law that God gave through Moses, you're putting the law of sin and death and making God responsible for that. That's a straw man, because I don't believe that that's what Williams said. I don't think that's what Catholicism believes. So I'm just going to call it out. This is a major straw man that's being stated. I don't think it's true. Now, he also says heresy. Okay. Now, heresy, we could do the same thing. Just look up what heresy is. Okay. But heresy to what? Okay. Heresy by definition is especially when you're talking about it from an Orthodox standpoint, is something that is an opposition to main Orthodox Christian theology. Maybe heterodoxical, you might say, but again, the irony here, and I think that I think that Schley, you said it well, but the irony here is that Adventism is in itself, it's on the borderline, depending on the veins that you get in, of blaspheming. I say that, I don't want to say that too curtly or too abruptly, but at minimum, many of their doctrines are heterodoxical, meaning they're definitely outside of the normal view. Okay. But yes, Schley, I agree. Okay. This I will agree with. I do believe that the investigative judgment is heresy. Okay. And when I say heresy, okay, again, just so you know, I'm not making stuff up. Okay. Let's just ask, what does it mean for something to be a heresy? Okay. Heresy involves holding and defending beliefs that contradict established religious teaching. So when an Adventist says something's heresy, I want you to understand this. When an Adventist says it's heretical, what they're saying is it's at opposition to Adventist theology, established Adventist positions. When we talk about heresy in Christianity, we're talking about doctrines that are at odds with the apostolic creed. I mean, like the core tenets of Christianity, of which the investigative judgment absolutely is heretical to the core of Christianity. Okay. Now, I'm sure that they'll come back and they'll make arguments elsewise. Okay. The point is that using the term heresy, okay, needs to be very precise. If you watched any of the videos with Kirk Cameron, with his interaction recently with Hellfire and, you know, that whole dialogue, one individual that did a rebuttal to him was very poignant in saying we need to be careful when we say heresy, because there are things that you can disagree on, but because they're not, you know, like what happens after you die is not a core tenet in that everyone must accept that position in order to remain Christian. Now, I wrote an article on my Patreon that deals with what's called contending for the faith. And I talk about the different tiers, the different levels, okay, of things that we can dialogue on. Tier 1 items are things that you will find yourself being called heretical, okay? I don't know all of your positions that are watching, whether now or in the future, but the Trinity is one of those, okay? One of the core tenets of Christianity is Trinitarian. So if you, which again, everyone has their own opinions, but if you are anti-Trinitarian, then with regards to the core, like, Christian position, like you are at odds with the Apostolic Creed, which means that you're believing a heresy. That's the proper use of the term. Now, here's my encouragement to Edwin. If you're going to use the terms blaspheme and heresy, use them right. Okay. If you're going to claim that his argument is heretical, William's argument is heretical to what? Is his argument actually at odds with Orthodox Christianity? Or are you just saying that because it's at odds with the Adventist position? That's not what heresy, now you can define it that way, that's fine. But Adventism is not an established religious teaching inside of larger Christianity. It's a break-off, it's a sect of, okay, and it comes out thousands of years removed from Christianity, okay? All right, we're going to land here. I'm going to just give you a couple of final thoughts. And that is that, well, let me just show you one last thing that you can use with Logos, and then we'll shut it down, okay? Yeah, that's fair. And again, Schley, I know that you've got much more expertise in this area than I do. But I appreciate you bringing that up. Okay, it must be monarchical Trinitarianism, which is Trinitarianism as taught by the Holy Orthodoxy with the Essene energies distinction. Yeah, and most people don't, especially in the Adventist church. I'll just say this from my own personal experience. Most people, most Adventists, most Christians really don't even understand the distinctions. Okay, so if you don't understand the distinctions, don't argue it. Try to learn it before you make arguments. Adventism likes to claim that they're Trinitarian. They're not. They don't align with the same Trinitarian positions because they have different definitions. I did an entire 3-hour dialogue on this, tracing the differences. Okay, whether or not I did a good job or not, it was the best I could at the time. Now, I want to show you that if you're reading a passage like Romans, okay, and we're trying to keep things in context, and we want to see how scholars have interpreted passages. Because again, remember, the law is dealt with quite a bit in Romans, 74 times, okay, nomos. So if we're looking to understand and learn the positions that have been held, one of the ways you can use the study assistant is to just type, what are the various scholarly interpretations of what Paul is referring to with regards to the law of sin? Because that's the argument. Remember, he makes an argument specific to the law of sin. But I want to ask it with regards to Romans 7-8. Now we're going to get, again, resources that are going to give me some perspective. And I'm not going to read through all these, but I want you to understand that there are differences, okay? Notice that scholars debate Paul's precise meaning. Now, the reason I bring this up is because Edwin makes a categorical error. Now, this happens a lot in Adventism, because in Adventism, it's like, we have the truth, it's this, and it is what it is. Everyone else is wrong. Edwin's argument is neutered from the real historical reality that scholars have been debating the law inside of Pauline theology forever, for a long time. Okay. So if someone's going to be intellectually honest about what's going on here, then you need to engage in the scholarly debate. You need to engage in it. You need to have access to it. Okay. You need to know. This is again, I'm going to say this. This is partly the reason why I don't choose to jump in and debate someone like Edwin, because he just isn't exposed to this stuff. The same is true especially is true with Kevin, because they just don't. Their desire is to prop up the Adventist system, and so they're going to make any length and any state possible, any argument possible, any other scholar in the Adventist system possible is going to come on. Any pastor is going to come onto their position and onto their platform to continue to prop up their ideas. I'm not interested in that. I've changed my positions on lots of things as I study. So here's what this says, and then we're gonna land the plane here. We're gonna end on this, okay? Scholars debate this regarding the law's relationship to sin, with interpretations falling into several distinct categories. The relationship between law and sin can be understood in three primary categories: the revelatory interpretation, where humans learn what constitutes sins through the law; a definitional interpretation, where the law defines sin as transgression. That would be more the Adventist position, okay? And a causative interpretation, where the law actually brings about sinning. While acknowledging elements of other views, some scholars favor the causative interpretation, though this creates interpretive complications. And they go on. Significant interpretive approach focuses on Paul's rhetoric purpose. Now, that's important when you're going to engage with Pauline discourse. Defending the law's goodness while claiming believers must die to it, requiring explanation of law's place in God's salvational plan. Now, we're not going to get into it because I don't have time. We've gone too long tonight. But this requires someone to get into covenant theology. It requires you to explain how you understand redemptive history. All of that is the baggage that you or I bring, that Edwin brings to the text. Okay. Edwin has a certain baggage that's the Adventist framework. It's the great controversy theme. It's the law, meaning the Decalogue in his definition of the law and the Adventist perspective of the law. It's the Decalogue has always been on display. It's in the heaven pre-creation. It's in heaven post-creation with the fall. It's going to be there post, our glorified bodies. And the law is kind of the big thing. And inside the law, because Ellen White had this vision called the broadside vision, where there was this halo over the fourth commandment, and now the fourth commandment becomes the pinnacle of the Decalogue itself, which becomes the litmus test for everything. Okay, because why? Well, the law is the transcript in the Adventist interpretation. The law is the transcript of God's character, and so you too can prove and vindicate God's character. Which, by the way, I don't see why God needs his character vindicated, but you too can prove it and vindicate it by accepting Christ, because Christ enables you to keep it now. And that's the whole crutch theology that was kind of referred to in the dialogue. So I say all that because everyone brings baggage to the text. And if you don't know what you're bringing to the text, you will get blindsided by your own presuppositions and biases. Now, I'm not going to read all this, okay, but this is how I do research. This is part of the way I do research, where I will find books that kind of help me understand something. I will then read those books. I will read those sections to understand, so that I get the perspective of what's going on. Now, here's what I will say as we end. What Edwin is doing, what ADL is doing, is not responsible biblical scholarship. That's not how it works, friends. You don't throw around words like blasphemy and heresy for disputed exegetical questions. These are questions that people have wrestled with forever, ever since early Christianity. Now remember, inside of, as I've said, inside of the Adventist framework, the law is what vindicates God's character, which supposedly is what's under question since the mythological person Lucifer, which we already talked about is not even the name of the devil, started questioning if the law itself could be kept. And this is the entire premise. This is the linchpin to their whole argument, which is entirely unbiblical. It's a construct out of Ellen White's mind. There's nothing in the text that claims there's any kind of law in heaven prior to creation that was somehow violated and questioned, and none of that's there. It's just not. Okay. But because of this, because inside the Adventist framework, the Decalogue is the very transcript of God's character. That's the reason why Edwin makes, I think, he can correct me if I'm wrong, that's the reason why he feels so triggered to use things like blasphemy and heresy, because in his mind, that's the thing, okay? Now, I do have a question about the Decalogue as we exit out. And this is the last thing I'm going to leave you with, and then we'll have to cover some of these other things maybe at another time. I'm going to assume for a second that the Decalogue, the 10 words, are actually the transcript of God's character. I'm going to assume, by the way, I wrote an article on this, okay? But I'm going to assume that the Decalogue is the transcript. I'm going to go to Exodus 20. There's a couple things I'm going to point out. Okay. First thing I'm going to point out, there's no numbers here, by the way. Okay. The Adventists like to balk quite a bit at Roman Catholicism because they break things up differently in the numbering system. There is no numbers here. There are no numbers. And that in and of itself has been a debate. How do we, how do we categorize these? Well, we there's no numbers. Okay. Thank you, Dexter, for reminding me. Yes, I'll get to that. Thank you. So pick any of these. Okay. If this really is the transcript of God's character. Okay. My question is this. I'm not going to pick the common ones that are used here. Okay. My question is this. Okay. How is honoring your father and mother deal with the transcript of God's character? Does that make God, does God have parents? What does that have to do with God's character? Is it because he's a parent? Well, he's not really. He's a creator. He's not a parent. He is the creator. But he's not my mom or dad. Like, what does that have to do with the character? Okay. Committing adultery, is God sexual? Is he a sexual being? That somehow, like, not being an adulteress somehow, like, vindicates his character? What does that have to do with his character? Because again, these arguments depend on, like, if you're going to make an argument that the Decalogue's moral, it's binding on everyone, like it's a transcript of God's character, okay? And yes, if the Decalogue is God's character, then it means iniquity is ontological. And 100%. Now we're on to, like, blasphemy, okay? And you could go down the list. I mean, bearing false witness, coveting my neighbor's house. Like, what does that have to do? Like, God owns everything. So again, I don't think Adventists think about, like, these do not define God's character. In fact, if the Decalogue was capable of defining God's character, it's the transcript of God's character, then God is a very small God. If that's true. I mean, you got 10 things that define him. This is all he is. We just defined him. Like, that's the character. That's the transcript of God's character. No, that's not. Okay. So we just got to stop. This is the reason why I push back on some of this stuff. It's just highly out of context. Now, Dexter, I know you wanted to get to, can we read John 13:31? Okay. When he had gone out, Jesus said, now the Son of God has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified, oh, I need to share my screen. Sorry about that. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. This is the Gospel John. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new, now here's a new entole, a new command, that you love one another. There's that agapeo. It's to care for each other, okay? That you love one another just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. Now, a lot of times people will make the argument, okay, and I don't think it's a good argument, that that this replaces the Decalogue. I don't think that's, again, laws function inside of different covenants. Analogous, I wish we had had time to get to the marriage analogy, but it's analogous to traffic laws in America only function inside of the agreement that I'm in this land, and especially if I'm a citizen here, okay? Because I'm a citizen, I should know better. I have a driver's license in the state of Arkansas, for example. There are different laws in different states. Now, they're all traffic laws, okay? But if I go to Europe, or if I go to Australia, if I go to other countries, yes, they have traffic laws, but they're not like, I can't just like do what I do in the US, okay? And I know this is a poor analogy. I'm not saying that this is completely analogous, okay? But I think it serves the purpose of, I think, what Paul is kind of arguing towards. And that is, if you're in Christ, we didn't have time to talk about this. If you're in Christ, you are a new creature, okay? Being in Christ means that you are in a covenant relationship under a new directive. No, that doesn't give you license to go murder people. No, you wouldn't do that. Of course you wouldn't do that. Okay? Just like being a citizen of the US, you're not going to go, like, if you're not going to, sell secrets to another country. Yeah, like that would be, again, that would be horrible, right? So it doesn't give you license to sin, but it also doesn't require that you keep them with regards to your salvation. Now, I know that we'll get into the whole, like, the fruits, and like, I know that there's arguments of how to handle the inner workings of how it all works. Pauline theology is complex, okay? But I want to just further reiterate that it is important to understand that the terms nomos, the terms entole, they mean something contextually to the argument or the narrative or the statements that are going on. Paul is not arguing for the reenactment, the restipulation, the renewing of the Mosaic law. He's not arguing for that. That doesn't mean the Mosaic law can't be valuable. That doesn't mean you go out and kill people. That's not what it means. But what Paul is arguing for is that we are a part of a different economy now. We're different citizens now. Because we're different citizens, we are expected to follow the commands of our King. It's not the 10. Now, he He does command you to not kill people. In fact, he commands you to not be hateful towards people. He does command you, okay? This is the laws of Christ. He does command you, yes, you shouldn't commit adultery. Yes, absolutely. It would be against a grievous act towards your neighbor, okay? Towards your own wife, your spouse. But he also says you shouldn't be lustful, okay? So we'll get into some of these other details at another time. We've been 3 hours and 15 minutes. Holy cow. Thank you guys for hanging out with me this long. Do me a favor. If you've liked the conversation tonight, hit like, hit the heart button, share it, subscribe, hit the notifications. Again, do me a favor. Go get signed up for Patreon. I didn't have a chance to share my affiliate code for Logos. If you're interested in gaining access to the tools that we looked at for better study, just scan the QR code, jump into Discord, and I'll get you set up with a couple of, I think you can get a couple of months free. Yeah, I think that's a good way of ending. This economy concept is a really good way of understanding, I think, what Paul is trying to argue towards. All right, friends, with that, I'm going to shut it down. We've been on far too long. Appreciate you this evening, and we'll see you on the next one, okay? God bless. Keep it real.